allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This meeting is being live streamed by Chelmsford Telemedia and posted to the CPS website for interested community members to access and watch. Although we are not allowing for in-person public participation, interested community members were encouraged to submit their names and addresses to Superintendent Lang if they wanted to participate remotely under the public input portion of our meeting. During our public input session, anyone who has joined us through GoToMeeting and expressed an interest in making a comment will be recognized by the superintendent and allowed to speak with the committee. If anyone watching this meeting live has questions or comments to share, they're encouraged to email one of us during the meeting, and we'll read the questions or comments during our second public input session at the end of the meeting. So, welcome to this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee. As I am sure most of you know, tonight we'll mainly be focusing on school reopening plans. Tonight we'll be presented with the work done by the different committees that have been meeting for the past few weeks to discuss the three different options for reopening the schools in the fall: in-person, hybrid, and remote. Additionally, there have been other subcommittees who have been discussing special education services, facilities, and communication strategies, all of which will be part of these plans. Once we approve the three plans, they will be submitted to the state. The committee will then be discussing and ultimately deciding which option we think would be best for the Chelmsford Public Schools to open themselves up sometime in the near future. So, there is no consent agenda tonight, so first thing is, anybody have any good news? Maria?
Okay, I'm all excited to say this because we have some incredible parents who are members of PTOs, and the Harrington PTO led this fundraiser. It was a mask fundraiser done with Center Sports here in town. They sold over $10,000 worth of masks in the town, and a percentage of it goes to all the PTOs. They're sharing it. So it has been a very nice thing, a nice collaboration, and a great fundraiser. And Allison Stevens, I think, and the team at Harrington, congratulations. It's great.
Great. Okay, any other good news anyone would like to share? Okay, well, we are now then to our first public input part of the meeting. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, anyone who wanted to participate in tonight's public comment needed to email Superintendent Lang, who then provided a GoToMeeting link for tonight's meeting. So those that are speaking tonight, I just ask you to try to limit your comments to 3 minutes so everyone has an opportunity to speak. Also remember that this comment period is for items listed on tonight's agenda. Although we will not be responding directly to your comments during this part of the meeting, we'll try to address them when we get to those items in the agenda. So at this point, I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you. We actually had 3 individuals reach out to me to speak this evening, so we'll just go in order. So I'm going to unmute John King. John, if you can hear me, you'll be first. Oh, hang on a second. I'm having trouble unmuting you.
He might have some, is he muted?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you check, John, and see if you're muted? There you go.
goes.
All
All right.
So you're live.
Okay. Thank you. So my family and I moved to Chelmsford about 5 years ago. I have 2 small children who will be entering the school system. The reason I asked to speak is because I'm also a public school teacher. I wanted to comment on behalf of our town's educators and school staff. New data is constantly emerging about COVID, and it's far from clear the children are not vectors for the virus. The often cited study from South Korea said that students under 10 were less contagious, but not that they aren't capable of transmitting the disease. Other studies have pointed toward children's ability to actually be more likely to spread COVID to others. And then for our older students, 14 and above, they seem to be just as likely to contract and transmit COVID as adults are. Given the potential for spread, we have a Harvard epidemiologist describe the hybrid model as probably among the worst options. Anthony Fauci described return to schools as an experiment. Neither of these quotes inspire me that this is like to make this happen in-person learning. And frankly, I don't think anyone in town should be comfortable with an in-person setting for their children. Now, I realize the importance of returning to in-person learning, but we're simply not ready. I've been to most of the schools here for community-related events, and I can tell you that the state, in my opinion, the state of our school buildings will need significant upgrades for ventilation, just as the school system I work in does. Insisting in-person learning is the only answer only serves to pit staff health against student needs. Also, I'm frankly just tired of people lecturing educators of the importance of in-person learning. We know it's our job. It is literally our jobs to know. We became professional educators to teach in person, not sit on computers, and we're certainly eager to do so as soon as it is safe. But frankly, right now, I haven't seen anything that makes me think it is safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. John, I forgot when I welcomed you on, I forgot to get your address. Do you mind just giving me the address for the record?
Can I email it to you? I'm not really comfortable announcing it over.
Yeah, I guess because I didn't ask you ahead of time, but in the future, all public speakers are supposed to state their name and address before they do speak at a public meeting.
Okay.
If you want to email it to me afterward, I just need it for the record for the school committee minutes.
I'll email it to you right now.
All right, that would be great. Thank you very much for your comment. Next up this evening is another parent, Peter Malloy. Peter, let me, whoop, I unmuted you, and I think you muted back. So give it a try and see if you can unmute. Okay, you're on, Peter.
All right, thank you very much, and much appreciation to John. I echo all of his sentiments. An hour ago, the Boston Globe confirmed that Mass has reported its largest daily case increase in 2 months, 438 new confirmed cases today, 9 new confirmed deaths. And that is obviously emerging data that for anyone who's been remotely paying attention has been only increasing over the last about week or so for the state of Massachusetts. While we in Chelmsford may be not specific to those exact numbers, we also do not operate in a bubble. And so any decision to go back to school in any capacity, hybrid or in person, needs to be taken with understanding that parents and siblings are going to bars and gyms and all other kinds of larger spaces where transmission is most probable. There are some basic values that we all try to teach our children: being safe, following the golden rule, using evidence to support your claims, and looking out for those less fortunate. Bringing kids and staff back into the building in any capacity is a direct violation of those values. Yes, as John said, and I completely agree as a school teacher myself, in school, in-person learning is the way to go. Everybody wants that. But these are very difficult times, and they require very difficult decisions, as the school committee had to make on busing, which I commend you for, because it was, in my opinion, the right decision, albeit a most difficult one. During a pandemic, the most important decision one can make now is the one that seems so far off that others will tell you you're panicking. That's the idea of a pandemic. So I implore the school committee to truly think about how unbubbled we are as a community. And I urge you to truly consider remote learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Third speaker this evening, Rob Russo. I'm going to try to unmute you, but can you see if you can unmute yourself? Oop. There you go. Rob, I'm sorry, did you want to speak?
Yes, please.
Oh, go
Thank
ahead.
you. Not only am I a lifelong resident of Chelmsford, but I have the awesome responsibility currently in representing our teachers and staff for the Chelmsford Federation of Teachers. And I appreciate the comments of the parents before me. I also appreciate the fact that all of us are working under horrendous, really, circumstances. And I want to reiterate that, the Chelmsford staff is dedicated and committed to offering the best education possible always. We're also trying to offer the best education under these dire circumstances. Most of our staff I think all of our staff wants to teach in person, but clearly all of our staff are anxious, as I'm sure you are as administrators. I want to commend our staff, and actually I want to commend our school district, because we've had many staff, parents, and administrators working on these plans. And we will continue working with the school district We look forward to that. But we really do need to make sure that we are making the safest decision for all of us. And I would just be reiterating what our parents have said before me, so I know this needs to be short. You guys have some work to do, but I do look forward to working with all of the stakeholders to try to be as safe as possible. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
All right. Okay, so that would conclude this portion of public comment. Again, if anybody watching at home has some comments they want to email any of the members of the committee, we can read those into the record at the end of the meeting as well. All right, so moving on to new business. The one item of new business, reopening plans.
Yeah, give us just 1 second.
Yep.
To switch gears.
Dennis, can you have people email you? Because I'm nervous that I'm gonna not forget to check or something. So, you know, that way it'll be consistent.
Sure, if they want to
So,
email me, that's
yeah.
fine. Yep, yep. If you've already gotten one, that's fine also.
I'm sorry, I
Oh,
didn't
I
hear
have to get
that.
off, I'm sorry.
I was saying if people want to add something, to email Dennis, and that way we will make sure it's all going to one place.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Are you up, Linda? Okay. So I'll just, as we're getting this going, kind of preface a few comments for you for tonight. So we are going to spend the vast majority of this evening just kind of talking about the state of affairs, you know, where we are in the planning process and taking a look at schooling for the fall. As a couple of the speakers had indicated, we actually, over the course of the last number of weeks, 2-3 weeks, have had a significant number of parents volunteer to work with us, staff members volunteer to work with us on different committees taking a look at the reopening of schools. What I want to review for you is a little bit of the timeline that we're under schooling-wise. Linda reminded me before the meeting, sometimes I have a habit of getting too deep into the presentation and stealing her thunder. So I'm actually just going to try to mind myself and stick to my slides. But we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, talk about some of the choices that we have before us. Specifically spend tonight looking at the work of the different learning groups and the charge that the DESE has given us to basically talk about, you know, what an in-person learning environment would look like, what a hybrid would look like, what a remote learning environment would look like. And in all of my different conversations with, you know, my colleagues and people across the state, I do think, regardless of which option we end up implementing in Chelmsford for the fall, it's worthwhile work to actually fully vet out those 3 options for us, because over the course of the next year or so, we could really find ourselves in any scenario at any time. And I don't think we want to find ourselves like last spring. Everyone rose to the occasion to quickly put together a remote learning plan. But I think we want it to be a little bit more seamless this time. And if we were in some type of an in-person environment and we needed to switch to remote, that we could do that. And we're already going to know what the expectations are going to be, how we're going to make that transition. Or if we end up being remote and we're able to start going back into some type of a hybrid model or an in-person model, we already have thought that out. So I do think it's very worthwhile putting these plan documents together. And that's what we have spent a significant amount of time doing. So I'm going to review with you the timeline and then ask Linda to actually walk you through the 3 different plans and a little bit about the decisions we have to make. So I do just want to preface my comments, and I've talked to some of you individually. We don't actually have to make a decision this evening. So I don't want people to feel panicked that, you know, we have to decide one way or the other tonight what's happening. And this falls a little bit into the timeline before us. So DESE actually, just while I'm speaking, DESE had provided us with their initial plan guidance on June 25th. So right at the end of June, they had spent the spring with their working groups talking about what learning environments should look like, basically asking districts to work on these 3 different plans. And at that point in time, we put the working groups together to mirror some of the work that was happening at the state level. So we had learning groups, we had groups looking at personnel, groups working at special populations, facilities and operations, and that work began at the middle part of July and went right through the end of last week. A lot of the working groups will still continue to work over the next couple of weeks, but we got some really good draft work from them at the end of last week that we're going to discuss tonight. We then, last Friday, had to provide kind of a summary to DESE with regard to what our different plans were looking like, if we had a feel as a district at that point, what we might be doing for the fall. But really, the deadline for them is next Monday, the 10th, and that's the date that we have to provide to DESE what our full in-person plan would look like, what our hybrid plan would look like, and what our remote plan would look like. Again, knowing at any given time, we could be in the different scenario over the course of the year. So, as we talk tonight, we may get some parent input, we may get some additional staff input. We want to talk through the different elements of the plans before us, and at the end of tonight, kind of talk about where to go next. We certainly need to decide and vote by next Monday of what those three options are. If it becomes clear to us at this point which way we want to go, or if there's a particular direction we're leaning in, we can take that action to, start to prep our staff and families. So that maybe we can talk about a little bit closer to the end of the meeting after we do this. I think the other thing that I just want to preface the conversation with is, we know where we are right now on August 4th. But when school is going to open up a month from now or a month plus from now, things can change. Things really have been changing day by day and week by week. So again, I think we shouldn't be too beholden to any plan, because we could have the best of intentions and want to implement plan, X, and have to make some type of a shift to plan Y because of the timing, because of what's happening, virus spread-wise and things along those lines. So there are different metrics we have to look at. But the goal for tonight is really to take a look at the three overarching plans. And then in the end, we'll talk about a little, some certainty around things that we know, and I think will help parents in the planning phase, and then some unknowns, and as a group, kind of talk about how to move forward. So that's a little bit of the timeline before us. Linda, can I ask you to maybe start walking us through on the learning group side, the three different models?
Excuse me.
Oh.
So how do you want us to do this? Should we ask questions as the presentation is happening, wait till the end? Do we want to have a discussion tonight? Are we waiting until the next meeting?
I would personally, again, this is, you're the group, but I would personally let us make the presentation so that you at least hear kind of the high-level overview of the three different plans. And then at the end of that, I'm going to talk about some of the things that we know right out of the gate, so that might help limit some of our discussion. And then we can figure out at that point if it's discussion we want to start tonight. Do we want to have a follow-up session? How do we want to deal with it? But I think as we go through the plan, it might become more apparent to you about what we really have as options in front of us.
Okay, thank you.
I promise it won't be like the academic one. It's not 43 to 72 slides. So like Dr. Lang was saying, that we had these groups, and it was wonderful that we had a lot of people that were willing to volunteer and help us out. And each of these groups were then vetted out into the three different subgroups for teaching and learning. Those subgroups didn't work in isolation. They had to work in tandem with the other groups that were happening. So for example, facilities out doing the measurements, right? Special populations had the same template that we were working with to see how that would fit into the teaching and learning, because they couldn't be separate. I know Dr. Lang's working on the communications piece, and then we also have that personnel piece. So a lot of that stuff was happening behind the scenes, along with the teaching and learning piece, because I think that is the bulk of what people were looking for. And just to reiterate and go through the process, we just wanted to make sure people were aware of how this ended up working. The dates, obviously, the 13th to the 31st, the working groups had 2 weeks to work, but the administrators and then the teacher groups got together prior to it just to have an idea of what was happening. So we tried to pick, and I'm speaking more specifically to teaching and learning, we had 5 parents for each of the 3 subgroups. There were parents that were on the other groups as well for facilities and communication and everything else. And then we had school committee participation. Dennis was the one that won for teaching and learning, so he was with me for the bulk of all of this. There were some virtual meetings that happened, as well as some shared Google Docs where people could work off-site, because the virtual meetings alone couldn't get all of this work done. And really, they were trying to brainstorm and look at different ideas of how to repurpose learning areas, how to come up with some maybe draft schedules, what would this look like when you started to go through that process. And then in the interim, we did, at least for teaching and learning, there was upwards of 70 parents that were willing to volunteer. So those parents joined me and Dennis in a virtual online just forum where they could just come up with their different ideas, and we could at least go through this process with them as well. So that was helpful that they could be part of that and give us some of that feedback that we then brought back to the working groups. So just a, quick overview, I'm going to start with the in-person, and it's exactly what it is. This is bringing back all the students full-time in school. We also have that remote learning option for parents that are opting not to send their students. And it's really about getting all of the information that would be necessary to do that. Again, repurposing learning areas, how the students would enter. So this is school as we know it, but with some tweaks in it, right? Because we know that we can't have all the students in the classroom at the same time. So obviously the pros, we know that this is the most effective education. This is what we do, right? And then having all of the relationships with your peers, with other adults, having the social emotional piece, having eyes on students is very, very important. And then, of course, we have like technical courses that happen at the high school that require using the equipment, something that would be very, very difficult to replicate if you were going to go in a virtual mode. And then, there's something to be said about a little bit of reduced screen time, right? Not everything is on a computer, and having that project-based piece to it. And then, obviously, the cons. It's the physical makeup of your buildings, right? We're working with a 3 to 6 feet spacing guideline. And the other piece and this is throughout, except for the remote, but it's the students in rows structure. So this is not how we teach. We don't try to put them in rows and talk to them all day long. We let them work with each other, put, small groups together. So that is a big con for either this and the hybrid. And you'll see that twice. So just a little, pros and cons of this piece. And then what I tried to do is, you have the larger document, and the larger document's about 20 pages, so it has much more detail in it. And those headings that are in that larger document are the guidelines from DESE, right? So that wasn't something we came up with on our own. We actually took the guidelines to try and just vet it out in the different sections and the different topics that they gave us. But in general, just to give up some highlights for people that are not looking at that document or haven't had a chance, it's what's going to stay the same. It's going to be students in classes following traditional school hours, having, their assessments and grading practices, homework, right, when they leave school, and then providing our special population services as we currently do in person. And then what would be different, though, would be, obviously, our desks would be farther apart. Students wouldn't be talking to each other. They're in those rows. And then the daily transition for the schedule, because one of the things that was highlighted in the guidance document was to try and minimize students transitioning, right? So bringing your specialist maybe to them, keeping them, maybe they're eating lunch in the classroom, right? So there's a lot of processes that go through with transitions. So that would be different for students who are typically used to getting up and walking to another class. Then they would obviously have to change all the patterns of how people go down one-way hallways, one-way stairs, and then hopefully using as much outdoor learning space as possible. But the students would still need to be split into cohorts, because we would need to use other spaces such as the cafeteria, gym, lecture halls, libraries, in order to have all students return to school. So that's different, right? You're not all going into one classroom. And then in the hybrid learning model, which is, a little bit of in-person, a little bit of online, it's like a little bit country, a little bit rock and roll. So this is an alternative between going back and forth. You could do week to week, day to day, 2 days in a row. And then what will end up happening is that students, their learning would change a little bit, because they would be in person for a certain amount of time with their teacher, while another group of those cohort students would be at home learning. So, and then they would rotate. So if you were in person at the beginning of this week, perhaps at the end of the week, the next group comes in, and then back and forth throughout the course of the hybrid piece. In all of these models, though, it's important to note that all high-need students may need to participate full-time in school, right, to receive services. There's certain services, again, you cannot replicate online. And then that remote piece, fully remote, is available for parents that would choose not to send, if we were going with a hybrid model, choosing not to send them in this model, they could stay home and have a completely online experience. And then again, pros and cons, right? We're going to have fewer students in the building, so less virus transmission. We would be able to do some deeper cleaning in between the cohorts coming in before the next group shows up. Students obviously get to connect with some of their peers and their teachers, and we get, again, those eyes on the students to see what's happening. And then it also allows us for that additional help, something that you might not see online. You can see it in your students' eyes. Any of us that have taught, you look at them and you're like, okay, you're not getting this. That's important for our students. And then professional development for teachers. And again, this is a lot of the things that the parents were saying too, is that we all know that this is important to have them in. It's just, how are we going to do it? And then those same barriers that we had with in-person are still our cons when it comes to hybrid, because with instructional days that you have less instructional days for students, but then you have the spacing, students in rows, and then it is more difficult to deliver different services for students if they're not coming every day. So as you start to separate them from being physically in the building, you'll have to then think of what do their services look like when they are in the building and when they're not in the building. Some of the highlights, again, staying the same. You would still have students that are assigned to teachers in different courses. They're going to be in their classroom. They will still be graded. They'll still receive assessments, feedback, homework. We're always, in all of these pieces, we're teaching the standards. We're not suddenly changing the standards on students, so they continue to learn. And then, again, with the being different, it is that pulling those desks apart, keeping them in rows. You can have no less than 3 feet distance between desks. So what is that going to look like? And again, in rows, how are you going to do that partner work? How are you going to do that cooperative work? We would put them in cohorts and continue to make sure that we have students that are going certain ways in hallways as they enter their classrooms and leave their classrooms. There would be pieces of synchronous and asynchronous learning options. So when the students that are home, what is that going to look like for them? Are they going to be in the classroom, outside the classroom, doing something different? Self-management skills and parent support, because it's different. You learn different skills when you're in front of students, the expectations, what happens in the classroom, compared to when you're online and you're working with your teacher, because the student's not there in front of you. So there's a different skill set that happens with this, and students have a lot of self-management skills that they would have to relearn when they walk through the door. We take the first 20, 25 days at the elementary level to really go through what are the expectations, how do you check out a book, where do you sit. So it's going to be different with students in rows and then students at home, and then when those students come in, it's going to change for them. And then remote is what it is. It's completely remote. This is for all students, full-time, being online, at home. Again, it's going to have students having their structured learning time. They're also going to receive services. They will still receive the same type of standards and learning that happen with that. And we also the technology that goes along with that. We'd have to have the same platform, which, we did do that in the spring, which is our Google platform, and making sure that students have all the instructional materials that they would need to be able to replicate a complete in-school education at home. The pros, it is flexible for families. If they decide that they don't want to be part of either a hybrid or completely in person, they have that, and sometimes it's a good fit for students in general. It's something that we've never offered in our district. Flexible option for students if we had to pick up and move into mode of education like we did in the spring, instead of it just being on us, we would have a plan in place that we could make that transition if upticks in the virus, or there's some other reason why we have to, move students to an online platform. We'd be able to digitize our curriculum, and, we're pretty curriculum heavy, so, I'm not that worried about it, but it's nice to have it all in one place. Teachers could collaborate online with Google Classroom. You do this lesson, I'll do this lesson, and sharing that. That used to be done with paper, binders. Here, I tried this lesson, I made it up, go for it. So this would be a nice opportunity for people to be able to share their platforms with each other. And then if you actually had a new teacher that came in, they would have something set up for them. How nice would that be? And then options for students for learning if they were absent, right? If you're just absent if you had to quarantine, or you're just sick in general, it's a nice way for students to be able to access what's happening in class instead of waiting after 4 days. You come back, they're a little anxious, like, what did I miss? And they're trying to learn at the same time as they're making up work. And then the cons, I don't think there'll be any surprises here. There's that physical interaction with their peers and adults, the social skills that might go along with that. We're going to have trouble with staffing, right? How are we going to staff this? What would this look like, depending on the numbers? At-home technology access, what do people have at their homes? We know what we have here, what's happening at the home. And then for scheduling conflicts for the different learning models. So if you do have some people that are in a hybrid, yet some people in a remote, what would it look like if we had to transition everybody back into school? What do our numbers look like? And then the highlights around this of what stays the same thing we're teaching. We're not going to change their teaching. We'll give them set school hours, remote hours. They'll have a schedule. They'll be graded and they'll have their expectations. They can be the mix of the whole group and small group instruction. You would be doing a lot of that through your Google Meets, which is one of the differences. People would be learning that way. So instead of saying, okay, this group is going to go over to this corner and they're going to be working on this, you'd put them in a completely different online group and then they would come back to the regular group. So that takes a little nuance with it. And then again, that synchronous and asynchronous learning. And we need to still work with that self-management because, again, we don't have them in front of us to be able to help them make sure they stay online. Are they on time? Where are they? Even bathroom breaks, right? Kids raise their hand, may I use the bathroom? If all of a sudden the student's not in front of you, you need to know where they are. So this is the other factors that we're going to have to consider, and I'm going to bring this back over to Dr. Lang to talk a little bit about some of these factors as we did this working group. And again, you have a 20-page document that vets this out way further than what I gave you. I just wanted to pull out some of the highlights for anyone that was watching, or if people had questions around some of the things, hopefully we were able to address pieces of it.
And so these I just want to touch on because I think, again, they kind of frame the context that we have before us. So when we take a look at the full in-person return to school in the fall, that would be more like traditionally going back the way we had. The DESE guidelines have now changed to be a minimum of 3 feet distance between spacing in desks and schools. When we took a look at that as a group, and we even look at how some programs were operating during the summertime with, say, a 6 feet distance, and you have different recommendations. Do you go 3 feet? Do you go 6? It's my feeling and my belief that I don't think we should get down to bickering about how many feet are going to be safe or not safe, that if 6 feet distance was the recommendation, that we should try to set up our rooms with a 6-foot minimum between spaces. I think it's important to me. I think when we're having discussions with staff and with students and families, I don't want to have to be trying to justify how, in a DESE document or any kind of medical document, 6 feet was required on August 20th, but all of a sudden on September 1st, it's 3 feet. For a practical person taking a look at it, I think people have issue with that. So one of the charges that I asked the facilities group was to really take a look at those 6 feet minimums between distances. And if you maintain a 6-foot distance between desks and physical setups in classrooms, it prohibits us from going back to a full in-person model. So in my opinion, although we have to supply the in-person model to DESE, I don't believe it's practical. I don't believe it's something that we can safely pull off in school, and I would personally take that off the table. I wouldn't entertain a full return to school at this point in time, given those metrics and those measurements. So I think for me, again, when we get there, if that's something the committee agrees with, one of my hopes for tonight's dialogue and conversation was if we're then left with 2 different modes, we have some hybrid modes with less than full-time students coming into the buildings and talking about what potential populations might benefit from that service and which ones might benefit from remote. It signals to, I think, parents and staff as we're considering this, that daycare is certainly going to be an issue for the fall. And although I don't know that we're going to pick a plan tonight to implement, our most in-person schooling would basically fall under the hybrid option, which when we took a look at the kind of the preferential model was that 2-day on remote, 2-day group B. That only means that our students are actually in schools 2 days a week. So families are going to need to find daycare those other 3. if we implemented a full, or wherever we ended up, if we started hybrid and we went remote, at some point, you might have to find daycare 5 days a week. So I would at least like families to start to kind of think about that, we're not going to have, in my opinion or my recommendation, a 5-day-a-week option to start the school year. And I think that might help at least get people thinking about what their childcare, daycare options are going to be. The other thing I believe we need to look at when we look at even in the hybrid, and again, depending on how the committee kind of talks this through, there is certainly value to trying to bring back safely small groups of students to in-person instruction, particularly when the transmission rates are as low as they are, hovering right around 2% now for the testing data. To be able to get students into schools, as Linda indicated, assess them, check their physical and academic well-being, find out where they're at, make those connections. I think it was much different for us last spring when we had to go out remote, that at least we had some of those, social norms already established. Teachers knew their students. The first time they met them wasn't online in a Google Classroom or Google Meet. So I think there's a lot to be spoken about on that front, and value in at least providing that face-to-face contact for students who want it, in the fall if we can in a safe manner. But when we took a look even at the hybrid schedules, the 2 days that the students were in, to really keep them contained to, kind of a pod within the school. Again, if you're talking an elementary classroom that has, 22 to 24 kids in it, let's even go on the top end, 24 kids. We know that families, under any scenario that we have, are going to be able to opt for just a full remote option. So there are going to be a handful of students in each classroom who are just going to opt to go full remote no matter what. And I think we have to really make that explicit to families that that is an option, that there is a lot of fear and concern around this. And even if as a district we decide to implement hybrid, you still have the option as a family to go full remote for the school year if that's what you elect. So I think we need to, in our communications, be very clear about that. But let's say that 24 gets down to 20. 4 students decide that they're going to go remote. And you did an A group and a B group, and you had 10 students coming in, Monday and Tuesday, everyone remote Wednesday, and 10 more students coming in Thursday and Friday. We certainly can manage that and probably exceed the 6-foot distance within classrooms as we're laying that out. But to do that, we would really want to take advantage of the time that we have during the school day, keeping those cohorts of, say, 10 students together so that they're not commingling, they're not transitioning in hallways and whatnot. And we would want them to come in for really the academic block. So at the elementary level, you might come in. You might do a morning meeting with your class. So you might have 10 kids in front of you, and you might have 10 kids online watching that morning meeting with your class. Then you might do, say, an hour-and-a-half long literacy block. Take a break, have a snack, a mask break and whatnot, and then do a mathematics block. But one of the recommendations and guidelines coming from DESE is really to try to, again, limit movement, to limit, people coming in and out of classrooms, kids having to go to specials and whatnot, using the cafeteria, things along those lines. So in some of the draft schedules that we've actually put together, and a lot of other districts are actually implementing for the fall, or negotiating to implement now, they're doing somewhat of a truncated schedule, where even at the elementary level, instead of being in school from, say, 9 to 3:15, students might be in school from 9 to, say, 1 o'clock or somewhere around that, getting all of their academic programming in. At the time when they would be going to lunch, instead of going to lunch, they get on the bus to go home. They have lunch at home, and then they go on the computer for an hour or so in the afternoon, and they might do their special that day remotely. So that you could do a physical activity, you could do an art project or a music project, and that is part of this. I think as we, again, start to refine some of those schedules and what some of that option might look like, parents also need to know that, because I don't want them in their mind thinking right out of the gate that, okay, at least those 2 days I'm there, it's a regular school day. It might be shortened because we really want to just take advantage of getting kids in for that academic time and being able to provide the specials, say, remotely. Same thing at the middle school, and the high school schedule is a little bit more tricky. So that is something that we're still working on, because the high school kids is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to keep them in cohorts together because they take such a mixed course load. You have a lot of singleton-type classes. You have level classes that you don't have at the elementary and the middle school level. So the high school is kind of its own animal. So we do have to do some work on that front. But I would want parents to know that, if we do a hybrid model, that it could be a truncated schedule, and they need to know that ahead of time, because that could impact someone's decision about whether they say, you know what, if this is the case, I'm just going to go full remote. Or, you know what, if the school is following these safety guidelines and my student is healthy and I'm okay with this, then I think it's valuable to get that FaceTime with the teacher and some social skills with their classmates for a couple of days a week. And I think, in the end, I'd love to be able to give parents that choice, that, they can have those choices. Another thing that I think we all need to be considering, and I would also want to kind of signal a flag to families, is we are going to have to do negotiations at our level with regard to whatever option we pick. We're going to have to negotiate with our unions. So we could want to do option A, and we could have trouble, and we'd have to do some kind of a compromise or what. So there is still a whole negotiation path on this. But one thing that the state did do, the Commissioner of Education kind of negotiated statewide with the AFT and the MTA, the larger groups, around providing some additional time for teachers at the beginning of the school day, for the teachers to come in and be able to prepare for whatever we're implementing, whether it be, again, I'm not recommending the full in-person, but if it were full in-person, if it were hybrid, or if it were remote. So they have basically they're reducing the required student days from 180 down to 170. So districts typically contracts count for 180 plus work days for teachers. So they're basically giving us 10 days at the beginning of the school year for teaching. It's an up to 10-day limit. A lot is going to depend on what program we implement, but that does need to be negotiated. For me, again, just a flag for parents, minimally, I don't see any organization settling for less than, say, like a week's time to get organized on things. We typically have moved to going back to school before Labor Day. So Monday, all the staff come in, and then the students come in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, take the 4-day-long weekend, and we come back after Labor Day and really start instruction. I really don't see under any scenario that the students are going to be coming back to school that week before Labor Day. So I also just, again, daycare-wise and planning-wise, would want to flag for our families that we will be revising the school calendar at some point over the next number of weeks whenever we figure out which we're going to implement. But I do not see a situation where our students will be in school that week before Labor Day. So I think that would be helpful for parents to know, too. If it ends up being the week after Labor Day or the week after that, I don't know at this point, but a lot does kind of hinge around Labor Day. So I just think that that's important to flag for our families. Another thing, when we're thinking about, daycare and childcare is going to be an issue under the hybrid or certainly the full remote. Full remote a little bit different, but even under the hybrid. While no decision has been finalized, I do not see us being able to operate the traditional before and after school community education daycare programs at the elementary schools that we typically run. We also run a middle school program at Parker, but we have the 4 elementary schools running before and after school care, because again, you're trying to keep your cohorts separate for when they're coming in, and it almost would defeat the purpose of all the work we'd be doing to try to create the safe learning environment in the classroom, to start now opening up additional opportunities for kind of commingling of students and not having that separation. So while nothing definitive is being done, I think we still need to look at the ComEd building, the Westlands building, a little bit different with what we're doing with the CHIPS program and the kind of the daycare program there, perhaps. But I do not see us operating the before and after school programs that we typically operate at the 4 elementary schools and Parker for the middle schools. So I think that's something else parents need to start wrapping their head around when it comes to that childcare. And again, that could be a factor when we relay to parents what their options are. That may push them one way or the other, whether they think it's easier just to go full remote, or, say if we were to do a hybrid option and give parents choice, to do a hybrid option. And then I think I actually did the last bullet earlier. But, in the end, whatever plan we select, we do need to work with our unions. We've had initial dialogue. Our groups are really great. I have to be honest with you, last spring coming together again when we had the outage, everyone knew it was unusual times. We sat down and worked together a plan that I think worked for everyone. And for that duration, it worked very well. I see us being able to work again with our unions for the fall. I think we all have the best interests of students and our families at heart. We all want to do whatever we do safely for staff and students. So that's why there is going to be kind of an uptick in discussions and conversations around, options. We also know that we have some staff members that may have some medical issues and an in-person setting might not work for them. So we're going to need to see, how many students opt into a remote option and how many staff do, and can we accommodate some of both of their needs by some type of a remote learning environment. We won't fully know that until we start to not survey, but actually get families to commit and staff members to kind of identify what their issues or accommodations may be. But I see that work really beginning later this week and early next week once we make the kind of the choice with regard to which directions we want to go in. So in a nutshell, I mean, that's kind of the overview. I wanted to make sure that I hit those few factors for you. And really for tonight's purposes, just start a discussion and let you know kind of where we're at.
Anybody want to start with questions?
Oh, thanks.
Jeff?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah.
Linda, I just had a concern with the hybrid plan where half the kids would be in class and then they would live stream the class.
That's one of the conversations in the working group that they talked about. So if you were in an A group and your A group happened to be in front of your teacher on those days, the B group, one of the conversations is that they would be able to see what was happening in the classroom, get the instruction, and then flip-flop them the other way.
I guess my concern with that as a teacher is like divided attention. I would feel badly if there were a group of students watching me and if they missed something. Because the nice thing with small numbers is hybrid. We've all always said we could get so much more done if we have smaller numbers, which is great if I have 10 students in front of me and I would never try to teach math, but if I was teaching math, but then I have 10 other students, let's say with their parents watching and they miss something, I think they're going to get more frustrated because I'm not going to be able to stop and when I walk around my classroom, I can see who's having trouble, but I wouldn't know who's having trouble at home.
Yep, I think that's part of the professional development that people were talking about, as well as, I think the concern is truncating the curriculum. You'd only get a half a year curriculum in if these kids are not moving forward. So I think that was just part of the plan of, how can we provide professional development? Make no mistake, I would forget about them. Somebody would have to remind me that this was happening. One of the other pieces that we were talking about, and we did do this in the spring in some of the classes, of recording the session, right? So that, say you did miss something, or you happened to be sick that day and you couldn't, be part of it, that you could go back and at least get whether it's a lecture or a experiment or whatever it is. So there's some ways that you can do that, and I think that's part of the discussions when we start to really vet out whatever program it is. So I understand what you're saying. I just think that there's some ways that perhaps would be about it, because there was a big concern of how do we get all, we don't want to make kids go back. We're not going to do grade 1, grade 1.5, grade 2, because they only had a half a year worth of an education.
That would just be as a teacher, I would find it really difficult.
Yeah.
The whole thing's different. The short time I taught at the college, it was difficult,
Yeah.
and I don't know if that would just cause more frustration for parents and students, because there's nothing worse than if you miss a step in math, because I'm assuming they wouldn't be able to buzz in and say, oh, by the way, what did you just say? Which would then mean you're really teaching 2 classes at once.
Well, they could, because they'd be on a Google Meet, so
Yeah.
there is that. It's no different than what we're having here with that. So like I said, that's part of professional development, and how do you do that? How do you not forget about students that, working in a group? I'd probably be putting students, I'd be like, don't let me forget about this. So we'd have to look at how that would play out in terms of being able to provide that as an option as pedagogy. It's a whole different
Whole
ballgame.
different.
And you're getting really kind of like high-level stuff at this point. like a lot of that, like the teaching practice piece, a lot of it's going to depend on the teachers, their comfort level with the different technologies as well. When we start to really kind of define which options we're going to put on the table. No, but there's still going to have to be a lot of follow-up conversation with staff around that, and even again in negotiations, because you're going to have some people that are more comfortable than others with, being videotaped and audio taped and whatnot. So that is going to have to be a point of discussion.
All right. John, any questions?
So one thing that's come up, and I've seen it on Facebook, and I've heard parents ask about it, and this is more an overall, on the remote learning piece, there's a rumor going around, and I don't know if it's true or not, and rumors are always great, but I want to dispel it or not. Is the state providing the curriculum for remote learning? Is that true?
This has been long talked about, so there's a lot of changing information, on a daily and weekly basis from the state with regard to what they're going to provide, what they're going to dictate, what they're going to recommend. Early on last spring, because districts were a little bit all over the place with implementing the remote learning that we did, one of their working groups that took a look at if we were going to be out of school for a long period of time, there are some districts that just don't have the level of really curriculum and support that, say, we have in Chelmsford in their own districts. There was a push for having the state contract so that every district didn't have to do it on their own that needed it, some type of a remote learning management platform or a system. Like, say, we use iReady. There are other different products out there. A lot of districts don't have that. And they felt that, obviously, it's the smaller districts that didn't have those resources, that there might be some buying power if the state, as a group, put together some resources for that. So I was on a call today, and supposedly tomorrow, they're going to be announcing that they did contract on a state level with a couple of different learning platforms, say similar to like an iReady or like some kind of digitized curriculum. You still need your own staff to basically teach and utilize that curriculum. I don't see it being something that we would use because
Okay.
we have our own.
Yep.
But the state is going to make that available to districts that are needing it. I just don't see that being a need for Chelmsford.
Yeah.
We would
So
be
it's not
using-
mandatory to use?
Oh, no, it's not mandatory.
No.
They were trying to leverage the state's
Yep.
resources and size to be able to get a better deal for a lot of smaller districts that don't have necessarily the resources or curriculum that we have.
Right.
So it's an option. I just don't see us needing to entertain that option
Need it.
with what we already have.
We have the resources.
Correct.
I think the question was, are we going to be mandated to do it? And that's kind of the language I'd heard around it, so I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
No, again, I think I'm answering your question on that one.
Yeah.
The only thing that has come up, and again, I don't think we're going to have to deal with that, but there are some schools, particularly at the secondary level, that maybe have some singleton-type high-level courses. So, like, let's say you only had one AP English teacher, and that person, for whatever reason, was out of commission, couldn't work. There are districts that are looking to potentially, like there's a virtual high school program where you can actually subscribe to and kids would take like a remote class. I don't think we're going to be in that situation either, just because we have a number of staff at all different levels that I think can accomplish what we need to.
Right.
But there is some discussion about like some really finite classes that if you don't have a staff member who's eligible or available to teach, either groups might work together and provide, say, a remote option. So let's say Westford did happen to have a teacher teaching this course and Chelmsford didn't. If we only had a handful of students that were at that level, might be able to remote into a class in another district. If we offered a particular class, we might be able to do something like that. Again, it's so early, I don't know any definitive for you. That's like a whole other level of specificity around programming. I don't see us doing it, but that has been bantied about too. I don't know if you happen to be talking to someone who, was kind of a high-level student with a really specialized course load. I don't know if that's who you were talking to, if that was the concern, or if it was just the generic across the board.
No, I just think that the people thought we would have to we wouldn't have a choice to opt in.
No, that's not the
Yeah,
case.
and I think that's really
Yeah,
was the
those
concern.
programs
So we're
are-
going to have our own curriculum
Right.
Yeah.
and our own delivery, and because
Yeah.
we already have the tools.
We already have that.
And
We
there are
already
districts
have-
that need it more, right? There are districts that don't
Well,
have.
yeah, they would still contract with with whatever this
Yeah.
form that they come up with,
Yeah.
but we wouldn't be in that position, because we also have like Edgenuity at the high school level, which is already set up either for full year, half year.
Yep.
And we've had some students who have maxed out of some programming that we've actually put them into the Edgenuity piece, and it still would be with the teacher of record, which would be one of our teachers.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I don't think we have that concern.
Yeah.
Just checking. It kept coming up, so.
Yeah.
Donna, your question?
Yeah, this actually doesn't have to do with the instructional piece. It has to do with our facilities. And some of the questions I have are all of the rooms that we're going to be using, are they going to have windows? I know that we have some interior rooms that are classrooms, not very many, but, you know, are we going to have good ventilation? And when was the last time our ventilation system was checked? Do we have a means for determining the air quality in rooms, and what is it? And I don't think fans are recommended. So as we begin the year, oftentimes it's very warm in the classrooms. Wearing a mask will make it more so. What's our plan for being able to kind of regulate the environment that the kids are going to be in, so that they can get the most out of their learning experience? And then finally, you know, around cleaning, who's doing it, how often? I would worry that facilities just could not get it done at the level that we need it done every single night. I mean, they do a great job, don't get me wrong, but this is extraordinary circumstances.
And the bus cleaning. I think we could tack onto that conversation too.
Yeah, I mean, if the full in-person, which again, I'm not advocating for, but the full in-person and even like the hybrid come with extra costs. Because, and like Brian Curley in our facilities department is quantifying those costs now. The facilities group is going to have a report that I'll have out to you, you know, in the near future that just you were on that, Jeff.
Yeah, I was on that committee.
That, you know, talks a lot about that, but we're likely going to have to add, even in the hybrid scenario, some extra contracted cleaning at night, even for like, say, that Wednesday, if we went with that 2-day on, remote, 2-day off option, so that we can have that deeper cleaning going on that Wednesday. During the school day, though, too, we only employ one custodian in our school system to do cleaning, but we're going to need extra help. So we have to figure out, do we repurpose some staff? Do we need to hire some additional staff? Do we contract for extra staff to be able to help us do just even some spot cleaning during the day when the students were there or staff were there, your bathrooms and high contact areas? So Brian and his group are putting a whole cleaning plan together that is going to be in compliance with the recommendations, but there is going to be a cost to that. So we will have that.
So air quality's been a big topic across many districts.
Yep.
You know, how are we assessing the air quality in the rooms? And then, you know, what are we going to do, I guess, as I said, to make sure that there's some type of ventilation, whether it be windows or otherwise? Because, you know, a lot of the windows are small. I think we've had some reports that some don't open. You know, what are we going to do to kind of remediate some of these issues?
I haven't personally heard about the windows not opening. I will tell you that, you know, most of the spaces that we looked at, I can think of a couple areas at the high school that have some inner rooms that might not have windows. Again, I don't know that particular facility if there's ways to repurpose or move some things around to be able to have some outdoor access to windows. Our elementary and our middle schools, with a very few exceptions, I mean, I can think of a couple rooms off the top of my head that are inner rooms that don't have windows, but the vast majority do. So that would obviously be something we'd have to look at. I mean, I did have a few people ask, you know, oh, we're going to add, you know, new HVAC systems in each of the buildings. We're going to add air conditioning. No, we're not. I mean, we're not in we don't have the ability to add, you know, air conditioning and, you know, HVAC systems to schools that don't have it. I mean, we have heating systems in these buildings, but I mean, typically, you know, in June, and no matter what school you're in, if you don't have an air conditioning system, it's the windows. You know, I know that there's some discussion about like not trying to have fans on and things like that. You might be able to install like exhaust fans that actually suck the hot air, say, out of classrooms instead of having the fan come in. So, I mean, those are options that I know the facilities group looked at. But I don't want to set the expectation that we're going to be adding air conditioning, you know, to the buildings. And I think individual schools or classrooms, if they have air concerns, we would have to be working very closely with our DPW, but likely even like a private contractor, to, come in, and if there was testing that needed to be done or sampling, to verify whether a space was acceptable or not, we'd have to be able to do that, and we'd have to have a plan to be able to do it quickly. I don't have that in front of you tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, just to add on to that, I've had some folks who said that there were windows that don't open in various facilities, so that would have to definitely be something to check. In the area of technology, no matter if we go hybrid or full remote, what's the plan for technology? Are we handing out a laptop to each child? That's a Chromebook so that everybody is on the same technology. If you could talk a little bit about what the plan is, what we have available, and what we would do in either the remote or the hybrid model, because in either one, they're going to be using a laptop.
Right. So, again, I don't have numbers right in front of me this evening. I can tell you that continuing with the OneonOne initiative that we have, for next year, we have already secured, our OneonOne devices so that all of our 5th and 6th and all of our 9th and 10th grade students, will have district-issued devices. I have been working with Bill around, a technology grant to be able to actually secure additional devices even outside of that OneonOne initiative. So that I'll be able to announce very soon. Aside from that, though, if we found ourselves in a remote or a hybrid option, and it looked like we were going to be closed for, a considerable amount of time or down from amount of time, we would have the potential to basically break down the Chromebook carts that we have in the buildings and distribute those to families that need them. I think, again, even from this past spring, what we did is we surveyed students who, if you needed a computer, we provided you with one. I didn't hear of a student who didn't receive a device that needed one. We received some feedback that families that had multiple students in a household would have liked additional devices so that every student could have their own device. I think we'll be very close if we, again, end up in that type of an environment where we would have the ability to provide a device to every student. Bill did talk to me about, even at the elementary level, say for like kindergarten, or if it had to go into 1st grade, we do have iPads that oftentimes those kids use instead of, say, like a Chromebook. So like an iPad might be an option for a kindergarten student. Again, you have to see skill-wise where they're at, but our goal would be to try to get a device in every student's hand that needs one. Whether it happens for day one, I don't know, because again, this wasn't part of the original plan. And everyone is competing for devices. What we've taken care of is every student we said we were going to have a device for, we will. But if we end up, needing to outfit another, 1,500 or 2,000 students, we're going to have to break down our inventory. We're also then just going to have to be cognizant of the fact that if we go back to an in-person environment and we need that technology, it needs to be returned to us. We're going to have to assess what condition it's in, and we're going to have to get it ready for building-based use again.
I think this is so imperative. It's the key here, because many people have said to me, they're standing in a classroom, especially at the elementary level, and they're saying, and the child is at home saying, I can't do this or that. And then they say, well, touch this key. There is no key because it's a different device, a different type of device. So it's extremely important that it be the same type of device that the teacher is using, that the children are also using. I think that's very important in either one of these models. The other thing is that if we're going to consider this is really access to education for everybody at the same level. If you don't have the device, it's like not having a pencil available to you, and you really can't do the work. So I think it's in either one of these models, I would say we're not going to be doing anything else other than that, very likely, given what's out there and what this virus is doing. So we should be working on it to get the Chromebooks and get it to be one-to-one basically throughout our district. If we have to talk about funding and how that's going to work and what we need to do, and we should, and make that decision. But the technology is, to me, extremely imperative. I consider my household to be a privileged one in the sense that, we have multiple devices. But even in that type of household, many parents have said to me that there were issues as they went along because something would break down and then you can't get access to it. So in addition to, quickly, just like we're having problems getting access to technology quickly, parents have the same problem during the school year. So another thing that I would really love to know is what's the plan for, one, the distribution of that technology, and then two, making sure that it's maintained as we go along. So if a person has a problem, are they going to be able to make an appointment and come to our technology center and possibly get that problem corrected quickly so they can move forward in their education? So the technology, to me, is absolutely key. Not only the virtual programs, whatever we're going to use, Google, access to Zoom, these things, I don't know if that's paid for now, if we're going to have to pay for it. But these types of things are imperative. So is this the piece of equipment that we're going to use and to give to each child. The other thing is training, making sure that each child and each parent has either a training video they can refer to or something that we're going to do so that they're aware of how to use it from the very beginning and get very familiar with it so that everybody, again, has the same access, I think is imperative.
And I think a lot of that's in the larger document too, in terms of
What?
making sure, that a lot of that's in this larger document too, in terms of making sure that parents and students have training on the technology.
Yeah, it's
That's a
in the
part of-
document,
yeah,
but
right,
what I'm
that's-
saying to you is that there is nothing in this document that says that we have one-to-one initiative throughout
But I'm just
this.
saying, the training part
this
is part of
district.
the document. so-
Right,
okay.
but that's not here, so I would want to know that that's something that we can actually do.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If the hybrid is as shown here, and even the remote, what do we do for students in terms of lunches that we usually provide, being reduced lunches for? Are they still having a breakfast program? How's that going to work? Either program, I
I
guess.
honestly don't know. So, I mean, there are still some unknowns in this based on schedule. At the elementary school level, again, this is just an example, but if you went with that, the 2-day on, remote 2-day. So if you're the A group and you're in school Monday and Tuesday, again, truncated school day, what I could see you doing is, coming in and beginning school, skipping breakfast at that point, doing your because you could eat at home because the elementary school doesn't start till 9. So you could eat, do your, say, literacy block for an hour and a half. When you're doing your mask break and whatnot, maybe we could be working with food services at that point to provide like not full lunch, but like a snack for the kids in the middle of the day. Something they could have in the classroom that would be neat. We're not going to take a break to go to the caf and come back. You then finish your day, you do your math block or whatever, and say it's 1 o'clock and you get ready to go home. The food service group legislation's been filed, we think it's gonna go through, that we could actually, do like a grab and go, so students who wanted a lunch could take a lunch to get on the bus with them. They're also trying to make provisions where you can provide 3 days of extra, so you can still provide 5 days of lunch per week for a kid. So on Tuesday, they can potentially bring, Tuesday's lunch home, but also Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So even though they're not going to be in school, we're not going to want them to come back to the school. That defeats the purpose of keeping groups separate, but they could go home with extra lunches. We'd have to figure out how that would all work. But they're trying to loosen up the regs similar to like the summer feeding programs so that you could do that. Again, we've got a little bit more flexibility with the middle school kids and the high school kids, but I could see something similar where we're making meals available. I just don't know, because if the schedule is tight and we're really trying to do the academic piece, I don't know if we want to spend a lot of time doing like a separate breakfast or something like that. It might just be more like during that break period where they have some type of a snack program through the school. But that'll be something that Nancy's working on with Brian and Joanna in facilities.
Other question, Donna?
To follow up on Dennis's question, what would our obligation to the free and reduced lunch kids, though, be?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Again, if that passes, then basically any student in the district would be eating for free.
Okay.
We wouldn't have, it'd be like a summer feeding site. So any student who wanted a meal could avail themselves of the meal.
So we would have to provide it then?
Yeah, but we'd be being reimbursed for everything that we,
No, I'm sorry.
I must be
Maybe I
missing.
misunderstood what you said, was you were thinking about like kids would come in, elementary kids start later, so we may not have to provide breakfast. But if we're doing free and reduced, don't we have some obligation to provide, food for them?
yeah, I don't think I'm 100% following you. So we would, like if this passes, and I think it's going to,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have to worry about collecting a fee from anyone. So anyone that wanted the meal could just have the meal, whether you were free, reduced or not.
Okay.
I mustn't be understanding
That's
you,
right.
Donna.
It's not the highlight of my question.
Food for everyone.
For our high-needs population,
Yeah.
didn't the DESE guidelines recommend that we have those students come back to school?
They did. And I mean, that was one of the guidelines, that your high-needs populations, you try to prioritize them for as much in-person schooling as you can. Again, say in the hybrid model, where you have your classes set up, the A group and the B group, for the 2 days on, 3 days off. What I would see is like your substantially separate populations, possibly going to 4 days. I still don't see everyone going 5. But if you happen to be, let's say, have a child in a life skills class at one of our schools, they may go both. So they might go in for Monday, Tuesday, and then also Thursday, Friday. What we have to do is just take a look at the needs and figure out, again, what we're going to classify as a high-needs population. Some of those families are going to want to avail themselves of that extra time, and some may not. Some may not feel comfortable because of, if a child has a medical condition and they don't feel comfortable doing that, so we would still have to provide a remote environment or a remote model for them.
If we went with a remote model, would we still have those students come to school to receive services?
Anything is technically still game. So, I mean, you could end up, if the district, I guess it depends on why you go into remote. We talked a little bit about this as a team this morning. If we just made the decision that we really want to go remote, and it was like a local decision, but you also want to have identified groups that want to come for in-person services, whether it's a full day or it's for an OT, a PT, something like that, you would have the ability to do that. You would need the parent consent to be able to do that. And I could see us following those lines. In a situation, say, where the state stepped in, like they did last spring, though, and said all schools are shut, then you wouldn't have the ability to do that.
Right.
You would just be all shut at that point. But I could see us, still, if we are full remote, and there are some populations that still need to be served, again, if parents and we can get the staff to support that, I could see us still doing that.
Okay, John, I think, has a question.
Yeah, I got 2 questions that just kind of came in, and I apologize for looking at my phone, but there's a bunch of people
Yeah.
just asking me questions. And one of the questions I had is about what kind of, so if there's, not if, when there's a positive test somewhere in the district, what data are we required to report at this point for contact tracing? Or is that our responsibility? Is it the parent's responsibility? Like, what's the, kid comes up sick, what happens?
Okay, so there were a whole separate set of guidelines to deal with like COVID and identification.
Yep.
And so we would be adhering to that. Sue Rosa from the Board of Health, Chelmsford Board of Health, that's the group that would actually be responsible for kind of reporting and tracing. I don't want to call her out specifically, but it's local, it's not DESE. So we don't report that to DESE at this point, it's a local issue. So if we have a student that tests positive, it gets reported, or Board of Health may know about it before, or at the same time we do, but they would technically be the group that would do the tracing and figuring out who needs to be quarantined,
They do the testing?
No, the tracing. They like the.
Who does the testing?
Test centers.
Well, yeah, like
Who tests?
a doctor may, a doctor's office, someone might go to a test center.
So if you have a student in a classroom and there's 10 kids and a teacher, right? And one of them is positive, wouldn't you proactively test the other 9 kids in the classroom?
Well, yes, so I thought you were asking who was the first test. So one child tests positive.
Yeah.
Then you identify whoever needs to be removed from the environment. They're then required to go to their, either like a local doctor, or they could go to one of the testing sites in the area. There are free testing sites everywhere, and get tested. The Board of Health would be the one to make sure that those people are testing, they're, negative, identify how long they have to be out of school.
So they have to provide proof that they got a test.
Yes, they wouldn't be providing the proof to us, they'd be providing the proof to the Board of Health.
That's fine. I just want to make sure. And
And to be honest with you, though, like, before we get too deep into, like, the medical stuff, we would have a whole separate meeting on a whole different night to talk about, like, the testing, the tracing. We would have, like, the professionals in, who that's their job, to work with us and tell us how that's going to be done. I don't want to pretend, to be the expert on how that's all going to work. We'd be working very closely with, like, Peggy Gump, who is our school nurse leader, Board of Health, people like that.
okay. And the second well, I guess this is another health, testing related question, but I think this is more, if we're looking at a hybrid model and whether we do cohort 1 and 2, however we break it up, the common thread between all those cohorts is the teacher and the staff, right? Because they're going to be there every day.
Right.
Doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose of keeping those kids separate and making those pools of people smaller?
Again, a lot just depends on proximity and, like, how close in contact and for how long you've been, is my understanding, exposed to individuals. And again, this is like a whole bigger discussion for another day, but
Well,
we are
we're
gonna.
running out of days.
No, I know that, but, like, we're gonna run into situations where, and my biggest fear is people who are asymptomatic.
Right.
That, don't necessarily even know they're positive or could be positive. We're gonna be in situations where, and we talked about, again, this morning, let's even say it's a middle school or high school, and for whatever reason, that class has to go out because of the teacher, the kids, or whatever kind of grouping. If people are asymptomatic and they're, still able to and willing to work, there's no reason why we couldn't convert, that class to a remote class for a couple of weeks, or until whatever period of time the quarantine ends and people are tested, come back negative, whatnot. I could see situations where regular school is still occurring. That particular class is out until everyone is safe to return. But they may actually kind of switch into a full remote mode while that's happening before they can be back introduced to the school.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Not bad.
So the other question is, so teacher gets sick and it's not asymptomatic and they end up
Yeah.
having, the bad version of COVID. Who's our sub pool? Is it our typical sub pool? What if the sub was teaching in Lowell? And, right?
There's been talk about that as well. So two things. If we ended up doing the hybrid option,
And this could, honestly, sub could be remote too, right? Somebody could get sick unrelated to all the people in the school or not.
yeah, the only thing, you don't have to really worry about the contact in the,
Right.
in the remote option. But we're going to have to take, again, a look at our staff and have some backups. But we would know in, say, the hybrid option, if you have just half the kids in the school at any given time. Even when it comes to, like, our additional staff in the buildings, like, say, our specialists, who might not be working until, or doing their lessons in the afternoon, we would have to have almost like a pairing system between our paraprofessionals, our other teachers in the building that aren't being utilized for the in-person hybrid learning, that they would need to step in, and they'd be more building-based. We've also talked about, even when it becomes, like, say, a subbing situation, we as a district might kind of hire and almost restrict subs to certain buildings, so that, like, you're, say, a McCarthy sub, and, we're going to, there'd be a cost again to this, but we may guarantee you, say, 5 days of employment each week, because we don't want you going to another school system to sub, to potentially bring something back to us. But you're going to be only assigned to McCarthy, or there's another group that's only assigned to Byham, to, again, just kind of keep people within their own schools.
Trying to keep them isolated. I have more questions, but I'll let somebody
Yeah,
else go.
we'll try to keep, Jeff, have anything else at this point? Maria, anything else?
Oh, I got a bunch, but go ahead, Maria.
No, I have a couple too, but I just want to make sure everybody
let's
gets
just go around, yeah.
opportunities, yeah.
I'm happy to listen right now.
Maria?
Well, I have so many questions about the tracing and all of that, people have asked, but when you describe that about one class and that class might need to go remote, just thinking in terms of the high school and how many people are in contact with that one student or that one teacher, I would think, it's going to be a huge number of people that would need. The other thing about this whole thing of the tracing and so on is the privacy of students and people don't want to talk about the fact that they might have it or not have it and so on, the whole privacy thing. So I think it would have to be a very well-documented process that everybody needs to buy into if we're going to do anything like hybrid or in person in any way. So there's a lot of questions there, but you've said it would be a totally different session, essentially?
I think, as we get closer to the school year, whenever we know that's going to happen, yes, you're going to have, in my opinion, like a separate meeting that just reviews the medical protocols and procedures so that everyone knows exactly how we're responding. It's inevitable that a staff member or a student at some point in time is going to contract COVID. We need to know ahead of time how we're going to respond. This is the response. Everyone needs to be comfortable with that. And it can't be like an after the fact looking up how we're going to handle it. This is the protocol. This is the procedure. But I think you would want to dedicate a separate meeting just to that and allow for some broader parent questions and input. That would be very difficult to handle all tonight.
Okay. So if we're going to put that in a totally separate session, then the other thing I think whatever model we choose is truly knowing the staff that we have available to man each one of these types of models. It would seem that returning fully to school, you've also already said that you would recommend not doing that at this time.
Right.
We probably wouldn't have the full manpower because some people, some teachers and some staff aren't able to return in person. Then if we do remote and we decide to go that route, we still have the problem of the substitutes, which John has just brought up. And then in addition to that, we don't know which folks can come in person, which can't. And in addition, which staff members, does that include people sufficiently to man the special ed or the EL students who require more in person per the DESE guidelines? We don't know that either. So what's the plan that we would have to get those numbers and the time frame before maybe we make a decision? Or are you envisioning that we would decide what models and then you find out what's available?
I think some of it's going to be going along parallel, right? So we're going to still need to be going down this road, talking about the options and making some decisions at the same time we're getting information from staff. What I see us doing is, it would be helpful to me personally tonight if at the end of the night, we don't have to formally vote, but like we agree that full in-person is off the table. Like, that would be helpful to me because then I could actually put together survey for our staff and our students to be able to say, we're now down to these options. Again, there's a whole litany of questions for staff, but even when it comes to students, we're not going back full in person. How many of you, want to entertain a hybrid option? This is what it would look like. Do you have preference, A, B days, all that stuff. How many just want a straight remote option? So we at least can know those numbers. At the same time, we would be having personnel, not survey, because it's not like a blind survey, basically question our staff through a questionnaire about, are you able to return to work? Is it a medical condition? Is it someone you're caring for? Is it just a general fear you're having? Like, they would have to work through all of that to figure out if we can make accommodations or not for those individuals in the workplace, and get to a point where we figure out how many kids are actually opting for remote, no matter what. And, where does our staff line up? Does our staff line up perfectly? I doubt it, but we could at least get a sense for what we have, and then be able to make some decisions. Go ahead.
Can I just add one thing in there? First of all, for me personally, I personally agree with your recommendation. So I would vote for not offering the full in-person at the beginning of this year. So that's me. But the second thing is that a lot of people have said to me that in order to fill out that survey and do it accurately on whether they would return if it's remote, or they want only distance learning.
Students or staff?
I'm sorry, for students.
For students.
Let's start with students. To know whether they could come back to a remote or to a hybrid, they would want to know what the hybrid is going to look like and what kind of safety precautions we're going to be taking in that hybrid type of situation in order to decide which one to opt for. So I think it's important that we provide what it's going to look like so that you can get some accurate numbers about who's going to return. It makes a huge difference to me personally even to say, yes, my girls can go back if your classroom is going to be only 3 feet apart, whatever. You know, there's certain things that are really important.
Right.
And it includes the contract tracing, because unfortunately, people don't always play by the rules, no matter how much I want to trust them. And I'm sure other parents feel the same way. And parents don't want to put each other in a very bad situation. I don't want to go around talking about somebody else's child, or somebody else doesn't want to go talk about my child. So we need to know very particular rules that are going to happen in order to really say, okay, it's all going to be distant until we have some safety here from COVID, or I'm okay with hybrid. And I'm okay with returning to hybrid. So just telling you that, I think it's important to know what that looks like before the survey is done. I would think for staff, and the teachers here can probably address that better than I can, but I would think that for staff, they would want the same thing. They would want to know what precautions are going to be taken in a classroom in order for me to return or live or not.
Just kind of following, I'm sorry, Jeff, just following up on that, with the hybrid, there are 3 different suggestions here.
Yep.
What was the feeling of the group that looked at it? What would the preferred model be?
Yeah, it was my understanding, and just in the conversations when we were doing the debrief meetings, is that, you know, the 1 week on, 1 week off was not really conducive, right, for parents and students, because we would lose the students for a full week, and a lot can happen in a week. And I think for some parents too, if they were going to go to work, they would like to be able to say, I'm available on this day and this day. So there was, I would have to say, almost full consensus around the 2-2 model that we offered, right? And that was the, you know, for lack of what days are the best days, you know, almost like a Monday, Tuesday A group, so AA, Wednesday remote, our group, and then Thursday, Friday, the BB group. And then not to rotate
Okay,
them, they
okay.
stay in those days.
Okay, so it's not an AB, it's an AAB.
No, 'cause that would
AA.
defeat the
Yeah, I
purpose of,
agree, I
like,
agree,
trying to
but
prepare
I
for the
thought
next
in the schedule
cohort.
that was provided,
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
back, it looked like it was AB, which didn't.
Yeah, it would just
AA
defeat
makes
the
more
purpose,
sense.
but there
Yeah.
was more of a consensus towards the 2-2 model
Okay,
of that working group.
so
Choice
same
three.
kids in
Again?
for 2 days, then a day off.
Say again, yeah.
AA.
Yeah, then a day
So
off.
just think AARBB.
Right, okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff?
Jay, I just had a question. Last meeting, the union hadn't shared the results from this faculty survey. Have they given that to you?
We actually met with them yesterday, but they've
Okay.
had a couple of different surveys.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact percentages off the top of my head, but in everything, there's a mix. So there were staff that were comfortable coming back to work, particularly if we adhered to the 6 feet guidelines and not the 3. A lot of staff are just concerned around the 3, and a lot of parents are concerned around the 3. So I think people would feel more comfortable with that. And then there were a number of staff members who identified having, let's say, medical condition that prohibited them from coming back to work. There was, I forget the number, there was another group that basically had like a family member that they were caring for, that they were concerned about coming back from. And then there was a group that had childcare as an issue. And I think there was a group that maybe didn't necessarily have a condition, but that just had kind of a general fear of coming back to work. So that would obviously have to be worked on.
And but that was taken before we set up all these guidelines in the classrooms, right?
There was 2 different surveys. So they did one a long time ago. I honestly don't recall what that one was. They just did one yesterday, I
Oh,
think.
yesterday, okay.
Yeah, and again, I don't know how much the staff, the large staff, got to see what happened in all the different working groups. I'm hoping once they start to read some of the documents, they might help educate themselves a little bit. But that's something, obviously, we'd have to work very closely with them on, because whatever model we're gonna implement, we're gonna need, buy-in from the masses to be able to to be able to properly do it.
Thank you.
Can I just ask to follow on you? Was that option 322 hybrid model on page 8? That was the most preferred?
Don't know what page, but. Yeah.
It is? Okay, thank you.
John, question?
So if we have, let's say we go full remote, now, first of all, special needs kids that require a lot of so I get a lot of concerns about that, right? So my kid has really, in-depth special needs. So if we're 100% remote, we'll have some kind of way for those students, because if there's just nobody in the building except for those students, it kind of minimizes the risk. So will it be an in-school option for special needs if we go remote?
That's what we call the high-risk population, and that still needs to be worked out, under what scenario we're able to provide education for those students.
And the second add-on question to that, I know we're trying to figure all this out, but, so let's say in the schools, we decided to go remote. Would it be allowed for face-to-face, like appointments with the teachers, right? So you could have maybe 2 students in a classroom that need extra work that could come in, make an appointment, and they have, the teacher has a set time and can only accept, they'll have to use their judgment, but I trust the teacher's judgment to say, okay, these 3 kids really need help. I'd like to get them into the building, even if they sit 10 feet apart.
I think it just depends on scheduling and, like what the teachers are doing, comfort level at that point. I mean, we'd have an issue if the district said we're all going remote, and then there's all these exceptions to why we're going remote. But
I don't
that
know if
would,
that's an exception. I think, if you have a kid that has a math lesson that can't figure it out,
yeah.
coming in to sit with the teacher for an hour.
Well, the teachers would be teaching. So that would be the only, they would still be teaching, so that would be the only hard part about office hours, right? If you're completely remote, I'm teaching during that session.
I mean, I gotta
It would
tell
be
you,
almost like
I'm a
maybe-
remote parent, and I can tell, and I have really good teachers, and I'm very happy with the remote instruction I got, but a lot of that is on our own time. Now, I know we're gonna be changing that and
Yeah,
try
it's
to
not
make it
the
a little
same.
more interactive, but I can tell you 4 or 5 hour periods where it was just me, my wife, and my kids making sure they were going through lessons. We became the coordinators
Yeah,
for the
this is completely different.
This is gonna be
teachers
different?
teaching, so
This
they
would be more teacher-led for the
Yeah.
day.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I follow in that line? Okay, so for the special, I was part of the special needs group. So let me just ask a couple of questions on that. Okay, I think what John is saying, what I got out of that group a bit, was that it was very difficult for EL teachers and special ed teachers who had to give extra type of things that weren't in the regular classroom to actually fit it into the schedule. So they're kind of an extra, especially in the EL. So or to coordinate the whole schedules was very difficult. So one of the things that was brought up in that group is the possibility of during, let's say, the Wednesday or the afternoon session, whatever, if that can be time for that particular teacher with that particular student. And if yes, can it be in person, and can it be offered in person? Of course, it depends on staffing, and of course, it depends on whether the facilities are able to do that and so on, and transportation in some cases. So, but that was brought up.
Right.
So it wouldn't be during the actual class sessions,
Right.
but it would be the services that are provided to that particular student by that staff member
Right.
because of their special needs. and whether something like that can be worked into the system if we're in a remote.
I think one of the differences you would see this time around in either the remote or the hybrid is that we're going to adhere to more of a traditional school schedule during the day. So let's say you had an L teacher who would go into a classroom to provide support. A lot of times the schedules got jumbled this past spring and there'd be conflicts or sped, they wouldn't be able to. But if we're actually going to adhere to a regular schedule, even your L and your sped staff can kind of go into the Google Classroom or do subgroup classroom pullout during that time. It'll be more scheduled. So I think some of it inherently by following a more traditional schedule is going to be resolved. If not, that Wednesday remote day, let's say it did happen to be the hybrid model, then there probably would be some time within that day if you had to schedule a separate session or a check-in session.
I think
We just have to see what it looks like.
I think the people context, like, I don't want to use the word contact, but sometimes being in the same room with the teacher, especially if somebody really asks for help, they should have some kind of vehicle for that, if we can do it safely. But yeah, that was the.
Don, I think, had a question.
Yeah, I think we just need to take a step back here for a second, and I think we have to decide what our priority is going to be.
Safety.
Okay? Because the fact of the matter is that if safety is our number one priority, then the only option we have is remote. Because no matter how well we prepare our buildings and how well we train our teachers, we're going to have kids coming in who may be asymptomatic and passing the virus off to staff people or to other students.
And,
That's-
do you mind if I dovetail off you for a minute?
Well, can I come back to me?
And then we'll go back
Okay,
to,
all right.
we'll dovetail back to the dovetail. So, and the other part of this is, from what I've seen, and I even hate to say this out loud, from the community, both on social media, I mean, when you read some of these posts, 30-40% of those comments are, this is all BS, kids need to be in front of teachers, this is just a fake, this has just all been trumped up. There's 157,000 people in 6 months, and there are people in our community, Chelmsford residents, that are pretending that this is all fake. So do I trust our community to do the right thing? The high school kids just lost their graduation from having a graduation party. And, you know, if a parent is online saying this is all fake, this is not real, are they going to have their kids isolate to the best of their ability? And the answer is no. I read it every day, and I just read through the comments. But back to you.
Thank you. I think it's just a fact that we have to accept, that if that is our number one priority,
Safety.
okay, then we cannot guarantee it. We just can't, okay? There's too many variables that we do not have control over. And I think that in addition to not knowing, you know, what people outside of the building may be bringing into the building, we have no guarantee that all of our students are going to be able to follow the rules around social distancing, good hygiene, or wearing a mask when they are in school. Safety is certainly one factor that we have to consider, but the other thing that we have to consider is that we are a school district responsible for providing an education to the students of this district. So, you know, it almost seems in some ways that they're competing. And this is where I think that we're going to get caught if we don't, I guess, identify what our priority is going to be.
May I propose, I think as a group, if we're going to keep asking questions, I think maybe it makes sense to have an idea of where everybody stands on which model now, and then we can focus on, if there's a majority, on that model.
Well, I guess I would say
Yeah, I
I'm
wouldn't-
not
I don't
quite
wanna
ready
jump
for
that quick
that.
to-
Because I would like to see the facilities
I
report.
mean, I know.
I would like to see the facilities report. I would like to see the special education report. I mean, there's still some, you know, and other questions that I have. But I think as a group, I think we have to have this mindset, okay? What are we trying to accomplish here? Are we trying to provide the safest experience? Okay? Or are we willing to say that to families, and I think it's only reasonable that we're honest, we can only guarantee, and we can't even then guarantee, but we can only provide you with the assurances that we have trained staff, good plans, and clean facilities, okay? And beyond that, you sending your child to school, you know, is not a guarantee.
It's a risk.
It is a risk.
And it's how much risk do we want to accept?
How much risk do we
And
want?
I guess that would be my question, like, when is it safe? You know,
I
you know,
don't know.
if CDC says 5% or less is safe, and we're at 2%, is it safe? You know, that's a
That
so
is,
big
right,
question, right? So
exactly.
is
This
2%
what we're up
safe? You know,
against.
some would say yes,
But I
some would
think
say no, you know?
Right,
So
but I think we have to say that out loud. I think we have to identify that this is where, you know, the struggle is, okay?
We also have to look at all the other aspects, like the social emotional piece of it,
Absolutely,
you know? So
100%.
kids locked up in their houses for another 3 months is not good for
Well, let's talk
their
about
health
that.
that way either.
Well, I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, I've heard a lot of comments about, you know, students need the social interaction, they need to be in schools. Does anybody think going back to school is going to be the same experience that it was before COVID? I mean, kids are going to be wearing masks, they're going to be socially distanced, there's not going to be very many sports. Definitely no contact sports. You know, you can't wrestle in the hallway, even though you'd get in trouble. I mean, I don't know.
It's gonna look
There
very
are
different.
reports of school districts opening all over the country that the day they opened, they had to go into quarantine. Israel was down to about 100 cases, and then they opened their schools and they skyrocketed right through the roof. I've said it before and I will say it again. Schools are not the appropriate venue to experiment with reopening during a pandemic. It's just not. So that's where I stand. The safety of the kids, and it's not just the kids, it's the staff, it's the administrators.
Anybody in the building.
It's the
Anybody in the
families.
building.
It's not just the people in the building.
No, hang on, okay.
Yeah.
With regards to the schools, because, and I said this recently, and it was actually said to me by somebody else, and it really kind of resonated. This is not a school district decision. This is a community decision.
Yeah.
Because as soon as we open the doors and kids come in and we send them back out, then anybody who may have contracted the virus is bringing it out into the community with them.
Right?
So, you know, we have to think of it that way. We just do. Okay, it's a very, very difficult decision. I'm not ready to make a choice tonight about what it is that I would do, but I think that it is important that we acknowledge that this is what we're up against.
Yeah. Yep.
I would ask one other question. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
I think the facilities report, when we get it, having been on that committee, I think that might be more we'll have more confidence when you see, I've been into the buildings and I've seen how the classes have been set up and all of the cleaning areas and all the cleaning stations and what they'll do for meals and stuff. I think that might give us a clearer view of what the schools will look like.
Sure. I mean, but even, okay, doorknobs, right?
Yes.
Let me just make my point, right? We don't think about doorknobs. You know who thinks about doorknobs now? Me. Because everybody touches a doorknob. And all you need is one kid to scratch his face and touch a doorknob. And then that's everywhere. And then somebody else touches it and they touch their face, so they touch their eye. And then it doesn't matter how much you clean. It's all the gaps in between those cleanings that are important. So I don't know if I'm ready to make a decision. I mean, I kind of know where I'm leaning, but
And I want to reiterate that I have a lot of confidence in our facilities staff.
Me too.
The problem is I don't know what is going to come into the building, because I don't know if people outside of the building will follow the necessary guidelines to keep everyone safe.
Right, and just to follow up, and, you know, you wanted to get an idea tonight and make a decision, I probably have 15 emails already, so I think we need to hear from the public more,
I don't think
too.
we need to make a decision tonight, but we should all know where we're leaning. I think every single person should have some
We
idea.
all need to collect information before we say we're leaning one way or the other.
I would,
I don't agree with that.
Oh.
I would say that I think,
I know you agree with
personally,
what
I
you said.
think I would be okay with making a decision on whether or not we should go full in person.
And,
I think,
no.
yeah.
I think we all agree.
I think we all agree.
That
on that.
fully off the
And that's fine,
table
because that gives us
as,
a couple of options, as opposed to trying to ask
as
all
an
this
option.
question. I do not support a full reopening. I just don't.
So
Okay,
getting down,
so-
go say, good, Donna.
May I make the recommendation, a motion? So we just take it off the table now?
Sure,
All right.
sure, we can do that. I think
All
we're all
right,
comfortable
I
with that.
recommend that the school committee remove the full return to school option for the September opening of 2020.
Second.
Okay, before we do anything with it, do we still have to submit a full?
We do, I mean, but the full return is just the full return.
Right.
But
Right.
I'll have the caveat in there that it's not,
Right,
it's not.
I just want to make that clear. We still have to submit this to the state as,
And I want to qualify, I said for September, but at some point, it could be a step
return.
down,
Yeah.
right? This is not, doesn't mean that we're throwing it out and all the hard
No, no,
work that people did is gone. It's another phase that we may have to use.
right.
Yeah.
So everybody's comfortable with that motion? Okay, so any other further discussion? All in favor of taking the full in-person model off the table for September Aye.
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 So we're down to 2. You had a question before, Maria? Yeah.
Oh, I always have questions.
I know that.
You know that, Dennis. And you're so happy that I'm right here next to you talking it over, right? Right next to you, by wear a mask, and you too. Okay, so having said all that, all the discussion we've had so far, and having taken that model off the table, we still, no matter what we do, in my opinion, have to come up with what we want as a hybrid model. And the reason I think that that's so important is because hopefully this virus is going to go away at some point. So even if we decide that we're not going to return in a hybrid situation, at some point, hybrid may need to come into being as we transition back in and get into the full in person. So hybrid is going to have to be resolved at some point. So are we saying that we're going to discuss the nitty-gritty, is that the American saying it is, of the hybrid model at another session, or are we talking about it tonight?
It's up to you. I mean, you have the overview of the different options the groups looked at, and I think our preference would be to go with the 2-and-2 model. So your AA, remote, BB. So that's what we basically be looking at. Obviously, we need to tweak schedules and all of that. We'll continue to do that. But, like, if I were a parent, what I would need to be knowing is, okay, do I want my child only going to school 2 days a week and being home 3? Or do I just want to have them home 5? I mean, that's kind of the question for parents. So I don't know how, and again, the time that they would be in school for the teaching piece would really be academic. That would be all the academic instruction piece. That would be the purpose of them going there. I don't see us getting into, is it a 90-minute literacy block? Is it an hour block and that? I think that's going to get handled at the school level. That's not really like a school committee decision, but it's more the structure. It being like the 2 days on, a remote day, 2 days off, the other group coming in. But that's,
Linda did put some
That's- no,
schedules
that's
in,
addressed,
samples,
right,
so
but
in the
like-
back of the
Right.
packet, there are some samples
Yeah,
of what it
yeah.
would look like, in a given day, and it would work by any model, I guess.
no, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think we
Yeah.
have to get to the level we're talking about, like, how
Right,
many
but
minutes
I'm
a
just
particular
saying,
block
Maria,
is.
I think that's kind of what they're
Well,
looking
I've
at.
seen that already, but what I want to know is tonight, are we in a position, or do we want to put this off to another day, where we're going to say, okay, so we have to go hybrid, and we have to figure out that model, and we know we need distance, and we know that in the distance learning, we need a much better situation than what we had when we left at the end of last year, because otherwise it's not going to be sufficient education. We're not providing sufficient education. So we know that. So we know that we're going to have to hype up what's going on in our distance learning world, and we know we're going to do a hybrid. Are we able tonight to say, out of these 3 options, this is the option we're going to vote on, and that we want to develop? Are we at that point or no?
On the
Do you-
hybrid?
Do you mean the options between, do we do AM, PM? Do we do week on, week off? Or do we
Yeah.
do the 2?
Option 1, 2, and 3 that were given on page 8 of this.
Okay.
Are we at a point where, or do we want, are we even considering that we'd explore other models, which I think is just, I
mean,
personally don't want to.
these are largely the models that districts have looked like. And given the vetting that was done and looking at them, my recommendation to you, and I believe Linda would concur, is the 2, remote 2 is the option to go with if we go remote. If we go hybrid.
Hybrid, yeah.
So,
That's what you're recommending.
So, 2-2,
Two,
AABB,
AA,
day
remote,
off, BB is what they're recommending. I guess we could vote on if that is an acceptable model for us.
I mean, if you-
If we
yeah.
went hybrid.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I still have some questions.
We don't have to do them, I'm just saying.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
This
Right,
is the
so
I don't think we
question.
should
We're
pick
gonna be
We're gonna have to
getting
meet
input
again
and
on
time to think
Monday,
about
right?
it.
Well, the 10th, yeah, so
Yeah.
probably Monday, but, so we could definitely digest.
Can I have a question about the slides, just real quick? What was the, and I just didn't catch all of it, I apologize, the after and the after care and
Daycare, you mean?
Daycare.
The last slide?
Oh, the last
Yeah.
slide, yeah.
Yeah, what was that all about? Can you,
Oh, about the daycare piece?
Yeah, the daycare piece.
So I'm trying to flag for parents watching this, that where we've taken the full in-person off the table,
yeah,
that they're gonna need daycare or childcare of some sort. Because if we're full remote, their kids are
Right.
home with them 5 days a week. If we go hybrid and we do the two-two model, if that's what we wanna call it, then basically they need daycare for 3 days a week.
okay, I didn't know if that was us trying to figure something, okay, I get it.
No, I'm just flagging it for them that, like,
Yeah.
when we took full off the table, which I absolutely think we had to, then I just want to get people's heads kind of wrapped around, we're not going back to school full-time. We're going to need daycare either 5 days a week or 3 days a week, however it would work. So I was just trying to kind of flag that.
Okay, I just wanted to
That was the only purpose.
got it.
Any further questions or discussions?
Yeah, I got more, but we'll just wait a little bit.
I do think we should probably get to some of the public's comments at some point. I guess that comes later on the agenda, yes?
It's later on the agenda, yeah, so that's why I want to keep,
All right.
if John still has questions, Maria, are you, anybody,
I
we'll
do
keep
have-
going with that.
Yeah, just one
ahead.
follow-up
Yeah.
with regards to the hybrid. What about a phased-in hybrid approach? We all start remote, or maybe I should say, high needs comes back, followed by elementary, followed by middle, followed by high school. You know, why do we have to bring everybody back at once? We could bring them back in, you know, say, high needs comes back for a week or two, then elementary, and, you know, for 2 weeks, then middle, then high school. You know, that might give us some time to kind of see how things are going, you know, whatever adjustments we need to make. You know, why do we have to bite it all off at one time?
And actually, I agree with this idea.
Yeah, DESI has actually made it clear that they won't entertain that kind of a model. That you have, because you have to have the 170, they've gone down from 180 to 170 school days. If you're not getting your high school kids in until like day 150, you've lost all that learning time.
Well, they've
They'd
had
be
all the
remote.
remote. We're saying go to remote to start doing phase.
It's a different way of looking at it, but then even for like our staff and operationally, to gear up to go full remote for 2 or 3 weeks to then go into,
Well, it wouldn't be your
Hybrid?
whole staff. It would be, okay, now we're
No,
going
but
to
even
open up
if you're a
part of,
if you're a high school teacher, you're asking them to basically take.
what about an
a month-
elementary teacher?
Well, you just put elementary
Well, I mean, I
sooner.
hate to say it, but if we vote to go to remote, they're going remote right away anyway.
But,
Right.
yeah, but then they're not gonna have to transition to something else immediately.
I think what Donna's saying, though, is they would have lead time, right? So you start remote for the first 2 months.
Yeah,
and
there
then
would
you
be
say-
some lead time, yeah.
Right, and then you, okay, this is working, maybe we try, I don't know. It's, how much risk?
But again, this is all gonna come down to this too, like, what's your trigger to all of a sudden it's safe to go to school? Because if it's not safe to go to school now, with the rates
Right.
being the lowest at, 2%, again, Dennis indicated, like, if it's not safe now, when is it ever gonna be safe to go back to school?
Right.
And and I think a lot of the fear is, if we just automatically default to full remote and that's our only option, then are we prepared to just stay in a full remote school system for a year plus? Like, what is all of a sudden gonna make it, short of a vaccine, safe to go back to school? There's always gonna be an element of, concern or, some data, like if we're shooting for 0, then, like,
Yeah.
it's a target you're just not gonna be able to make, absent a vaccine,
Yeah, I just to follow up on that, like, I, as a parent, I would want, like, why are we putting in the elementary kids in there first? They might say, excuse me, you're not gonna practice this
Right.
on them, and then the high school kids, well, they'll be fine because something happened with the elementary. I think that the optics of that just doesn't look good. Who wants to be the
Right.
sacrificial lamb?
I was actually thinking of it based more on need as
Yeah,
opposed to
no,
sacrifice.
I understand that, but it would, the optic of that would look like, well, if we have to phase it in, which we know we can't do. I'm just thinking politically, I would be like, well, no, phase in somebody else, let me know how it goes.
Can I throw something else in there? If we decide to go full remote, that basically means no athletics, activities.
Well, you can't be part of athletics if you
Right,
go
I'm saying,
remote.
that's what I'm saying. You can't be on
I
a
thought
team,
you
you can't be.
could. I thought you read if you did remote, you could participate.
How can
in
you? How can you
athletics.
justify that?
No. I'm not saying that we would necessarily
No,
have
but how
them.
could anybody justify that?
I-
If they say we have to go
because-
remote because we don't have kids together, how could you
Okay,
have a
fair
sports
enough,
team?
but there is the thing, if parents choose the remote option because they don't think it's safe, they can have their kids participate in sports, correct? I think Desi said that they could.
If we had
If we
hybrid,
have the hybrid option.
right.
So, and just to, again, I'm gonna dovetail off this, even if you did hybrid, do you think it's an appropriate thing to have kids playing wrestling? I mean, like wrestling or football or?
I'm not very hopeful for wrestling in the winter.
Yeah, I mean, but even baseball, I mean, a professional sports team with, an unending amount of money couldn't keep their players from all getting, a large majority of them from getting COVID, just riding on a plane.
Right.
Never mind.
That would mean all activities then.
No,
So that's another thing we have to consider.
Yeah.
We want to basically say, okay, kids, no sports, no activities, you just have to stay home and go to school.
I think that there are some activities that can be transferred to remote.
some can,
Some can.
some.
And I think that there are people out there, especially students, who want to give some input on this in terms of activities, and that's going to be coming.
But
So-
it wouldn't be in-person activities.
Not in person, but you can, there are things that can transfer to remote in terms of activities, in order to keep the socialization going. And there are many things that you can do in remote that we didn't do, and I think we would have to really think through carefully and get done if we're going to be for a long time in a remote situation. Can I ask?
Wow.
Yeah,
Little windy.
we might all be gone after
I
the
know,
storm,
there's
so.
no decision made.
The new school committee can come up with a decision if we get
Yeah.
blown away.
What Donna said in terms of what's our top priority, is it safety? Is it providing education that includes the entire experience? The entire experience that we know
Yeah.
happens because we have it. So in other words, we know how to do it with the students in front of us, with a teacher, face-to-face, and so on. We've had to learn it in a different way in order to deliver it. I think the thing for me is that I think that if we come to a decision and we can create the model and so on that we want, then we have more time to develop that better for our students and provide a much better experience for them for as long as it takes to get through this. And then we have provided what we're supposed to, because that's what we're here for, is the education component of life. So we need to think that, come to a decision, and move forward with it. There are always going to be people who are going to be one side or the other. And I would like to say at this point that I have truly appreciated all the comments from people who have looked at both sides of things and who have reached out to us and said, you're in a difficult situation. And they have done. There's a lot of people who have said that to us. And they realize that this is a tough situation because we provide a pretty good product. There are things in it that could be better, but we provide a pretty good product. We want to get to that same level if we're in a remote type of situation for any portion of the time that we're providing the education to these children. And I'll tell you, I was in the special needs group, the group that Desi is talking about, and I want them to get the fullest, best experience. But at the same time, I'm thinking of just the regular student who just loves to build a relationship with his teacher or her teacher. The little kid who's looking forward to coming into K and being part of a group. I feel for them. This is very tough. I feel for the teacher who is not going to be able to develop that relationship with that child. And I'm wondering if in a remote type of model, if we did that, or if we go into the hybrid, if there is some way we can provide orientation at the beginning of the year in very small groups to the teacher, if that's the way that we can just even meet the student and so on. Again, in very small groups, maybe take an entire week to meet the whole class in person. But doing something like that to develop the relationship. Like you said at the beginning of the session, Jay, you said that, we left school, but we knew the children.
Right.
The teachers did. Well, going into school, we don't even know who they are.
Right.
And even for a junior or a senior in high school, this is extremely difficult because you're looking at the end of this year possibly to get a recommendation letter from somebody to move on to college or do all of these things. So for each person, if we can develop this the best way that we can and transition these things so that there's distance but yet no distance, it just adds so much to what we're providing to this whole town and to the education of the children.
Okay, all right. Are there any other things that we want to kind of table this till Monday where we can decide on
Sure.
what hybrid option we want to use, and then maybe we can, well, obviously we'll continue this discussion about which of the two that we have left we want to pick?
Yep.
So, does that seem reasonable? Anybody want to continue the discussion tonight, or?
No, I think hopefully we'll have some more information by Monday too.
All right.
Maybe some more stuff comes out.
Yeah, you'll have the facility report probably tomorrow, and
Okay.
likely the special populations report tomorrow too.
Okay.
Just an overview of the work that the working
So-
group did.
The meeting would be next Monday,
This coming Monday, the 10th.
and at that meeting, we will vote on what the model will look like.
So by that meeting, we have to vote which model we're going to submit to DESI. We know we have to submit the in-person, but we're not going to go with it. We have to tell them which hybrid we're going to go with. And we have to tell them what the in-person would look like. So, I'm sorry,
The remote.
the three, whatever order
We're
they're
doing
in.
all three, but
Now,
we know what we're doing.
If you know at that point in time what you want to implement, you can vote that too. But minimally, we have to decide on the three to go to DESI
Okay.
by Monday. So we could schedule a special meeting and do that. What's the matter?
Well, I'm just
That
saying,
Mon-
and which one we're going to start the school year off with, unless something changes.
That would be ideal, right?
Okay,
Right.
yeah, because I think parents.
Monday work for everybody? 6
Make it
o'clock?
work. I'll make it work.
6?
One more question?
Certainly.
Okay, Dennis. So, come Monday, though, I don't think we have much time beyond Monday to make this decision. So, you asked, do we need another meeting in between? Because if folks don't feel that it's sufficient on Monday to go through this discussion and make the decision, that we need to know other things in between in order to feel secure and, sufficiently secure in making that decision, then we should schedule another meeting, because I think it's
We
important.
can Monday, if we find we're getting in the weeds Monday and that we, in terms of making that final decision, we can always schedule another. I mean, I know we have one the following Tuesday.
We have
you know.
to submit the plan.
What's that?
We have to submit the plan.
No, but I think we could definitely, I think we could say, this is the hybrid model we want to choose. And if this is the hybrid model we were going to submit to the state, this is our remote model and our in-person model. That's all we have to do Monday. That's all we're required to do. We could also decide, of those three, this is the one we're going to start the year with. But if we get into the weeds and we decide Monday, we're not ready to make a decision, we don't have to make that decision on Monday.
Is there any chance the state would disavow any of them? Disapprove of any of us?
I think the only thing that we're all waiting for is what is the data going to say 5 or 6 weeks from now?
Right, okay.
We could be in a situation, the state's going to take all three, they're going to review them. They might come back and say you need to tweak this or that. I don't think there's going to be major, because
Right.
they're all somewhat consistent district to district. But I think it's just what's the health data going to say in September that might just say, again, statewide, okay, I guess the only thing they can say is we're all remote. Because the state can't dictate if you're going to go in person or if you're going to go hybrid. So the only thing they could step in and say is the governor could say, no, there's going to be all remote for the start of the school year.
So we could still tweak, the plans that we send in, right, after we send it to them?
Yeah, they're going to be concerned about, if we're doing the hybrid, that they're going to want to know that we're basically doing, say, the AA remote BB. Because I think the other thing that, we've also thought about this too, at this point, we need to be somewhat in line or consistent with other districts in our geographic area. If districts are in, say, a hybrid mode, it'd be very difficult because a lot of our staff have kids in other school systems, and they're coming to us. So if another school system was doing, and I don't know of anyone doing this, but if another district was doing the AM, PM, and we're doing the 2-2 model, it's gonna be put another layer of complexity on staff as far as daycare goes for them. So I do think like this, the state is gonna be curious about that, but I don't see them coming in making wholesale changes as long as you're hitting your days on learning, you're hitting your learning requirements, those kind of things.
Can I have just an ask. So for the hybrid, do you have, can we talk Monday about what is the condition in the classroom? Is there hand sanitizer, like hand washing state, like
Yeah.
what, all the
That's all in the
mitigation?
facility report.
That's all in
So
the-
you should
And
have
it's all
that
gonna be
tomorrow.
facility, okay, all right.
It's all in our report.
I do think
the
we
safety
need to make a
requirements.
decision
Yeah,
sooner than
yeah.
later. I think parents need to have a sufficient amount of time to be able to plan.
Right.
Either way.
I don't disagree. I'm just saying what we're required to do, we have to do is
Right.
say, these are our three plans. Would be nice if we could also decide that night, of those three, this is what we want to do. But, you know,
Right.
we're not
And
required to do
buildings
that.
have to be prepared, because they now have to start,
Right.
they're gonna
Right.
do the detail work.
Everyone needs to know what we're gonna do
Yeah.
from an operational standpoint to the staff and
Yes.
parents, so the sooner we make the decision, the better. But what I am gonna be able to do over the next couple of days is actually start to basically put together survey documents for, our staff and families. You know, even like our staff, I know at this point, a full return isn't gonna happen. So I can at least say, you know, obviously, if we stay remote, I've got limited issues to deal with, but if we implemented the hybrid, what are your issues gonna be? So like, I can forecast that and foreshadow that and start working with HR. Similarly with parents, I'm gonna think about, you know, do I also kind of put something out to them to say, just to get a feel for where they're at? I mean, you have to remember, the last time we did the survey for parents to talk a little bit about the spring, and when they were talking about what they wanted for the fall, I know this was 3 or 4 weeks ago, but 90% of them wanted to return to school in some fashion for the fall. So if we know that the full in-person is off the table, that we're gonna adhere to the 6 feet distance guidelines, not the 3, you know, this might change parents' mindsets too, to be
correct.
more open to coming back to, say, a hybrid. So I'm gonna think about maybe figuring out a way to get that out there and get some data. And if I can bring that to the discussion too, I think that'd be important. Just so you get a flavor for where people are going. Donna?
Yes.
One group we haven't asked is the students. And at some point, I would like to hear what their input is, to be perfectly honest with you. But what they think about returning, what some of their concerns are.
Okay.
I'm just saying, at some point.
I mean,
I think it's gonna be important for whatever we do, that, you know, we have to have a sense for what it is that they're thinking and what it is that they're feeling, whether it's hybrid or remote, so that we can address those concerns, you know, as we open up the schools in whatever form or fashion.
Right. Anything else before we end the conversation?
Okay, just one more thing, and that's if we are, when we discuss this on Monday,
Yep.
if we are in a full distance model, and even if we are in a hybrid model, will the classroom be available to the teacher? Even if we are completely remote, is that their workspace, and are they allowed to return to the building? So that's another question I will have. So just let you-
And we have talked about that in groups.
Okay.
Our expectation would be, even if we're completely remote, that staff report to work and work from their classrooms. That's where the materials are. That's where we can support them technology-wise. So that would be the expectation.
Okay. Don't forget my technology question.
It's right on the top of my notebook.
Thank
All
you.
right, so Monday, 6 o'clock works for everybody?
Yep.
Okay, so,
I'll get that posted.
can you do that? Okay, great. All right, any liaison reports?
I just know that the Alumni Association Hall of Fame dinner, which was supposed to be September 26th, has now been postponed till they haven't set a
They haven't
future
set,
date.
yeah.
but that-
Okay, anybody else? All right, any new items people have?
did you want to talk?
I know it came up during the thing, but graduation is,
Oh, yes, earlier this afternoon, just for those watching, if you don't have someone in the senior class at the high school did make the decision to move change the graduation from in-person, which was going to be Saturday at the high school, to a virtual ceremony, a remote ceremony that will take place Friday night. And then, again, the senior class who's affected by this, or the past senior class was notified that Saturday will now be an opportunity for them to come by, pick up diplomas, yearbooks, things along those lines. But the formal in-person ceremony for Saturday has been canceled, and it's been converted to a remote virtual ceremony, which will now take place Friday night.
Right, and the only other thing is, I don't know if people get I'm sure they all get the MASC emails on different policies changing. One we had already changed, I know you emailed me earlier in June, the one on harassment. We had already changed that one too, be in compliance. The other one was more of a general basically an emergency interim policy on COVID related. I don't know if people want to look that over and see if that's something we want to contemplate or not. It's fairly lengthy, so I didn't want to get into it tonight, but if you want to take a look at it. Huh?
Which one?
This one, the larger one.
Oh, the large one, yeah.
So if you want to take a look at that over the next couple of days, and maybe we can consider whether that's something we want to take on or not, I don't know. Okay, any other new items? Okay, public comment.
Do you mind if I do the bus comment real quick, and then I'm
Yeah, go
done?
ahead, no, I have to.
All right. So I do, so one of the things I think we've kind of been dealing with, and this is I'll tell you a little bit more about the parent here in a second, but, you know, I said it last week, we have a whole lot of bad decisions, not good decisions, and we're not really getting a lot of help from the federal government or even the state government. I think, you know, everybody's in this downward trend. So really the only way we're going to get through this is as a community, right? So people in Chelmsford have to come together. So Michelle Tang, whose daughter Riley goes to the McCarthy, is eligible for the free bus. And she messaged me the other day, and it was such a good idea. She's actually going to figure out how to get her own child to school, and she's going to give up her bus seat. We don't even know if there's going to be buses at this point. And kind of her thought process, I think, was if I give up my bus seat, then maybe somebody else that really needs a bus, if we have buses, might have a chance to get it. So my wife and I, Cindy and I, have also said the same. So we're going to give up our spot on the bus seat as well. So I hope that parents that can figure it out will also do the same. So we're going to change the way we kind of operate and kind of our schedules, and we're just going to work around it to get both of our own kids to school. So I want to thank Michelle for the idea. I think it was a great idea, and the more parents that do it, if seats do open up for people that really need it, they might have at least a shot to get it. The second part of that is, and I had a question for Joanna, is I've seen some concerns about the refunds for those who paid for the buses already. Just roughly, like, do we have a timeline on that?
So we've we have about 960 refunds to issue, and it's about $160,000. And I've met with the town accountant this week to go over how we're going to do that as efficiently and quickly as possible, because we have to set up, it's in the weeds, 960, like, you're almost like a little vendor in our system to issue a refund check. So we're starting that list of 960 vendors on Thursday, and then we're gonna divide and conquer between my team and her team,
Okay.
and do them all at once, and then you'll see them on the accounts payable warrant. And then as soon as we see how quickly we can get through the 960, I can have a date for you. It's, you know, best case, late August,
Okay.
back up early September.
Okay. And I do have one more ask, and I'm done. Can you make sure my refund comes last for my son? Thanks. I would like to be the last refund issued. I want to make sure everybody else gets theirs first. Thank you.
As a follow-up to Michelle, Michelle did very graciously post that, actually, I believe on Facebook as well.
Oh, did you?
And that did lead to other parents also making a very generous offer to provide transportation for their kids, even though they live in the area town that would provide busing so that someone else might have it.
Nice.
All right,
It's good news.
it is public comment. I have, I think, 22. So I'm going to summarize, but then I'll type all these out and send them to everybody so you also have them, so nobody has to write everything down. But just I'm going to take this off because there's so many of them. Just quickly going through them, Colleen Giannino wanted to know, and there's a lot of this has to do with what we talked about. Has the district discussed polling families again, given the fact that the original survey went out so early and that things have changed in terms of the virus spread? Emily Sloan was concerned about safety like the earlier speakers, but it was also concerned for those students that require special services, and it believes that those students need in-person services. And without that, they may regress in some of their skills. Lori Grant wanted us to consider the 2-2 hybrid model of the ones that were listed on the packet. And she likes the fact that the models don't have a lunch in it. Lauren Romano wanted to know how many parents said they would opt out of in-person. We talked about that earlier, about 10% earlier in the year. And is it possible that some of these models, to have the teachers live stream lessons, we also talked about that, as they're teaching, like in the hybrid, teaching the class and also live streaming to other students. She also wanted to know about the ability to pick up materials, which I know was something that was addressed in here before the beginning of the school year. Megan Keogh was concerned about students missing out on the socialization and impact aspect of schooling if we went to all remote, and wanted to know if courses have to be cut at the high school with some of these models, some of the specialized courses. She wanted to know how will cohorts be assigned if we went to the hybrid model, would it be by last name or some other way? Katie Draper wanted to know what are the standards for when the epidemic would be considered controlled. We also talked about that, and use the same 5% as the number cited by the CDC, and we're around 2%, and has concerns for parents that have to work and also be able to facilitate online learning at home. Carrie Lucier says, is it possible for families to request a change in the model during the course of the year? For example, starting out remote and then switching to hybrid. How would you limit the cohorts at the high school where students are constantly changing classes? And what happens if a child is in a hybrid or in-person model and somebody tests positive? Allie Barnes wanted to know if students are in the building, are the teachers responsible for cleaning the rooms? Will the building air filters be updated? Would teachers in a hybrid model have to be teaching both in-person and remotely at the same time? Will communication be going out to families who require special services once a plan is decided? And also mentioned that parents would like to have a decision sooner rather than later. Kathleen Lopez wanted about one of your statements about teaching half a year's course. I just think you were saying we can't do that, so that's why we'd have to, if we had a hybrid, the teacher would probably have to be doing both things at the same time. Tanya Ponte wanted to know how the CHIPS program would work in any of these models. Chris LaValle wanted to know, again, about is there synchronous teaching going on well in a hybrid model, so the teacher is teaching both in person and remotely. Jessica LaRoche wanted to know if we were to go to a remote and a student IEP recommended one-on-one, would there be a paraprofessional assigned to that student in the remote model? Dan Tang, if there are two cohorts in the hybrid model, would it not make sense to have longer periods of time between the groups? So, the group being in more of a week-to-week type of thing. Katie Kuchar, do we know if we are delaying the start of the school year by the 10 days, which is something we're still talking with?
Just to that, for clarity, the only thing I think we should, again, flag for parents tonight is we will be making an adjustment to the school calendar after negotiations, and I do not foresee a situation where students will be going prior to Labor Day. So I think it's safe to say that school for students will be starting after Labor Day, that they should make accommodations at this point for at least that.
Amy Marcotte agreed with Maria that it would be good to have parents take another survey once we know what model you're going to use. Amy Malloy asked, is there any thoughts to having the cohorts for the hybrid be based on neighborhoods to make transportation easier? Adam Falzani would like more information about the opt-out option. Would there be just one teacher dedicated to those students that opt out if we would have any of these models? Peter Malloy says any model where students go into school has the con, I guess referring to the presentation, a possible spread of the virus in groups. Tara Purrington wanted to know, will K be full day in the hybrid model? Hannah Barker would asked if you could add your PowerPoint slides to the agenda packet, or there's Also,
Yeah.
the page in the website, I know that has all the different things too.
I can do that tomorrow.
Ann Waters talks about high school students with specialized courses will be very hard to do remotely. And Teresa McCann is disappointed with the decision not to do full in-person, or not to consider full in-person, and wondered what would it take to be able to reopen fully. And those are all I have at this point. So I will type those out. I know we can't address them all right now, but that's, obviously, these are some of the things that we can discuss at our next meeting. Anybody else have anything they want to share that's different from that?
Well, I'll just say that in one of those comments, the person who made the comment also said that it would be very important to have some final decision on August 10th.
Yes, I had a couple.
Yep.
Some are similar, so I'll skip the similar ones. There was an Antonio Toscoso. They just asked about difference in the full hybrid and hybrid option for learning. So I think we can better explain that in the document itself. And then you said Emily Sloan, correct?
Yep.
And then a couple of individuals asking about student transportation, and just, could we possibly relook at that, because it's a hardship for them getting students to school, and we get that. I think, part of that is also dictated by the model that we pick, and so that is in the works.
Maybe if, and I'll send you the list of questions, and maybe if you can get it to like a Google Doc, and then you can add your ones in.
Yeah, if you want.
And have people, and if somebody gets another one, you can just add in, so we have that all in one place if we want to have something to look at as we get ready for Monday, with all the, all the different input we have.
We could also, if you wanted, because technically it came in under public input,
Yeah.
we could give it to the secretary,
Okay.
and she could attach it to the meeting minutes.
Okay.
Just so that they'd be there
that'd be
in
great.
in the long run.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on the public comment? All right, we have an executive session scheduled. Want to just do a quick 5-minute update in terms of negotiation with the union. So I will take a motion to adjourn to executive session, not return.
I recommend the school committee adjourn to executive session in order to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, and not to return to open meeting.
Second.
Second, okay, so Donna?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Maria?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. Okay, we'll take 5 minutes and then we'll
Okay.